Hey there, want to make your voice heard at a Board of Supervisors meeting? We're all ears. Here's how you can get involved. First, hop online and look at the agendas. This will give you the scoop on what's coming up before the board. Each agenda item includes a brief description of the issue, the recommendations, and potential impacts. If you need more detail, check out the detailed reports online. Those are called board letters. Then, decide if you want to speak at Tuesday's general legislative session or Wednesday's land use session. You'll have 3 opportunities to have your say. Let's start with non-agenda public comment. This is your chance to talk about things that aren't on the agenda, but try and keep your topic related to county government. For non-agenda public comments, you can speak at either the Tuesday or Wednesday session, but not both. So, pick your day accordingly. And keep in mind, the board can't act on the spot. They'll refer your comments to the Chief Administrative Officer, who will look into the issue. Last thing, the board will hear from the first 10 speakers, 5 in person and 5 by phone at the beginning of the session. Then all the remaining speakers will get their chance to speak after the discussion items. During the consent agenda, the board handles a bunch of routine items with 1 vote. If you want to comment on an item, keep it simple. For example, I'm John Doe speaking on item 5, and I agree with approving the contract. Discussion items are the main event where the board debates before making a decision. Want to speak at one of the meetings? It's really easy. Just hop online and fill out a quick request form at publiccomment.sandiegocounty.gov. Pick the meeting you're interested in, hit the register button, then fill in your details. Make sure to include a phone number if you plan on speaking by phone. Prefer speaking at the podium in the board chamber? No problem. Just pick the in-person option. After that, just check off the agenda items you want to talk about and let them know you're for, against, or neutral on them. Hit register and you're good to go. A confirmation email will land in your inbox to wrap it up. If you're speaking by phone, the email will include the instructions for how to dial in. Be sure to submit your request early. Once public comment begins on the agenda item, we can't take any more requests to speak. And if you have documents, hand them to the deputy clerk when it's your turn to speak at the podium. Now, you get 2 minutes to speak, but if lots of people want to talk, it might get cut to 1 minute. So, you might want to consider writing 2 sets of comments, one for 2 minutes, another one for 1. That way, if time's cut, you won't be scrambling. There's also a countdown clock at the podium to keep you on track. Once you're at the podium, stay on topic. Stick to the current agenda item. If you stray off topic, you might get a gentle nudge to get back to the point. Keep your comments related to the agenda item's recommendations because that's what the board is relying on to make a decision. Also, speak directly to the board. They're the ones making the decision. When your time's up, it's up. Overstaying might mean getting muted or even asked to leave. Now for some ground rules. For safety, keep aisles and doorways clear. If there isn't a seat, head across the hall to room 302 or the 4th floor balcony to watch the meeting. Respect is huge. Everyone should feel heard. That means you, other speakers, and the Board of Supervisors. Disruptive behavior gets 1 warning, and after that, a deputy sheriff might show you the door. So let's keep it respectful. Your voice matters, and we want to hear from you. Remember, we're all here to make a difference.
Okay, good morning. I now call the November 19th, 2025 San Diego County Board of Supervisors Land Use Legislative Session to order. Ryan, please call the roll for today's session.
Thank you, Chair Lawson-Remer. Supervisor Anderson.
Here.
Supervisor Desmond.
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Aguirre.
Here.
Vice Chair Montgomery-Stepp.
Here.
And Chair Lawson-Remer.
Here. So before we begin this meeting, I'd like to take a moment to review our House rules. Public engagement is the cornerstone of transparent and accountable government, and these Board of Supervisors meetings are a primary venue where all San Diegans can make their voices heard. Our county is committed to a work environment free from unlawful discrimination and harassment, including sexual, racial, religious, age, disability, and any other forms of discrimination and harassment. Under the board's rules, speakers may not use loud, shouting, threatening, impertinent, slanderous, profane, and abusive language to any member of the board, staff, or the general public. Additionally, all remarks and questions must remain on topic during the duration of your speaking time and must be addressed to the Board of Supervisors and not to the county staff. Any speaker who engages comments that break these rules will be issued a warning. After one warning, you will be asked to leave the chambers for the remainder of the meeting. Finally, speakers threatening violence may be reported to law enforcement and removed from the meeting. We now proceed with non-agenda public communication. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board on subject matters within our jurisdiction, but not on our meeting agenda today. The only action we may take is a referral to the CAO. Speakers can speak once per meeting for non-agenda public comment, either at yesterday's session or today's session, and you may select which at your convenience. We have 5 speakers in person and 5 speakers by phone for non-agenda public comment. The remainder will be heard at the close of today's session. In accordance with board rules, any discussion items with 10 or more speakers, individuals have 1 minute to share their opinion. A reminder, according to Rule 4A, members of the public that are non-English speaking and need interpretation assistance receive twice the allotted time for their comments. And a final reminder, audience members shall not whistle, clap, stomp feet, or do anything that disrupts the proceedings. If you disrupt the meeting, you will be given 1 warning, and after that warning, if you disrupt the meeting again, you'll be directed to leave the chamber. Ryan, please call the speakers.
Thank you, Chair Lawson-Remer. We do have 10 requests to speak on matters not listed on the agenda, 2 individuals in person, and 8 requesting to speak by phone. For those individuals that requested to speak by phone, if you could please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. Go ahead and begin with the in-person speakers. As your name is called, if you could please come forward and stand on the arrows until it is your turn to speak at the podium. You'll then have 2 minutes to address the board, and if you could please begin by stating your name for the audio record. I'd like to invite forward Dorothea Flanagan and Robert Gurman.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. I came down here with my poison oak all over me and a hornet sting that I pulled out yesterday because I love North County so much. I'm from the North County Bonsall region. 47 years, I'm retired now, but for 47 years I have been taking care of that area up there regarding graffiti, trash, illegal installations, signs nailed to telephone poles, and now it's billboards. I have come to ask you, could we make Route 76 be a designated scenic highway? I could stop everything else. I thought I was pretty powerful, but billboards, I'm no match for it. Driving down here, I couldn't even see the sky through Mira Mesa. Now we have to look at 48 foot wide in the sky. That'll just separate our beautiful Bonsall. I spoke with the Bonsall Sponsor Planning Group about this, and they said that is a wonderful idea because we love to see the mountain ranges, especially when the snow comes on them from the east. We know what beauty is, and we fiercely defend it. A lot of people ask me, how is that Bonsall region so beautiful? Well, guess what? 3 weeks later, I'm climbing telephone poles and getting politician signs down because they won't come and get them. Please, designated scenic highway from Oceanside to the casinos.
Robert Gurman. Last meeting, we gave 50-year leases to the aviation industry in San Diego. Some of the things that were not discussed in that meeting was that the 50-year lease is advantageous for the FBOs to sell their FBOs, and that's what's happening across the nation, and that's just what, because of the industry, is having a rough time. Also, the 50-year lease hopefully will they develop the 70 acres that's been vacant for 25 years after we gave up our raceway and was promised a park, which we have not received in El Cajon. And they haven't developed the 70 acres, but the Pilot Supply House went out of business, and they're replacing it with a brewery next to a flight school. Because, you know, they don't have to worry about DUI checkpoints out on the runways. So, you know, there's no problem there. But I was really surprised to see a brewery being put up next to a flight school. And another thing that would benefit the aviation industry at Gillespie Field, the FBOs, is that when you give a 50-year lease, like I said, it's advantageous to selling. And one FBO is focused entirely on San Diego Gas and Electric. So I would expect that San Diego Gas and Electric would now purchase its own hangar for its firefighting crew, a public, for-profit utility company that is the only one in California. But leave it to Gillespie, they're there. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will hear from those that have requested to speak by phone. Again, in accordance with the board rules, we will be hearing from the first 5 callers. Remaining callers will be heard at the conclusion of today's session. When it is your turn to speak, you will be unmuted. You will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments, and we will go ahead and begin with our first caller.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Kathleen Lippett. Now, I'd like to talk about the public policies of the county and the influence that the marijuana industry has had on it. The marijuana industry, along with industries that are influenced with political electeds, sold the lie that eliminating the black market would protect youth with legalization. And it could be accomplished by just regulating it. Both that strategy, it was classic first order thinking, and it was wrong because there was no thought to the consequences of that. Both our city and county leaders continue to focus on strategies that ignore the consequences of these consequences. While the administration focuses on eliminating drugs like fentanyl coming into the U.S., Chinese fentanyl, it continues to ignore the fact that it is the demand for psychoactive drugs that should be our focus. Similarly, the county does the same thing. Harm reduction and treatment will never get ahead of our drug problem. There was recent news that President Trump managed to extract a, quote, pledge from China's Xi Jinping to stop sending fentanyl and precursors to the U.S. But the problem is that it's the demand that keeps that going. So that is not good. The pledge, no pledge is going to work. The United States needs to focus on demand reduction, and that does not happen through increasing availability, access, and promotion of this industry without ever pushing back on it. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. We'll go to our next speaker.
Barbara Gordon. As a public health advocate and someone who works with young people, I am here today to share some big health and public safety concerns. A national organization, Action on Smoking and Health, whose focus is to push back against the big tobacco, has uncovered a 24% increase in tobacco lobbyists in the U.S. As these lobbyists work to influence policymakers, they downplay the health risks associated with tobacco products and promote misleading narratives about their safety. This aggressive marketing strategy targets young people. aiming to create a new generation of users. With the use of e-cigarettes and vape products, the tobacco industry has shifted tactics by appealing to youth, which is their primary target. Lobbyists push for regulations that flavor these products, which weaken our laws aimed to restricting youth access and advertising. The presence of such lobbyists can undermine public health initiatives designed to educate young people the dangers of tobacco and reducing efforts to discourage youth. Please consider how this board can counter the influences of the tobacco industry. I urge you to strengthen your county's tobacco retail license by reducing tobacco retailers, restricting advertisements, and increase tobacco fees, all which will improve the regulations designed to protect public health. Thank you so much for letting me speak.
Thank you. We'll go to our next speaker.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors. My name is Terry Ann Skelly. I'm a parent and public health educator and planning group member, and I came today to share information from the U.S. Surgeon General periodic general report entitled, and I quote, "Eliminating Tobacco-Related Disease and Death, Addressing Disparities." The report especially dealt with the role of secondhand smoke and vapor contributing to unclean air, which has a much higher toll on the less advantaged people. And it had two main strategies that applied to the Board of Supervisors. Strategy number one, implement smoke-free and vape-free policies for public places and apartment complexes. And strategy number two, making smoking and vaping products less appealing and available. The Surgeon General advises that the advertising, promotion, billboards, and sponsorships of smoking and vaping products be highly restricted and out of sight of children and young adults, and to limit the number and density of retailers of smoking and vaping products, whether it's tobacco, marijuana, or CBD products. The stores for tobacco, marijuana, or CBD smoking vaping products have notoriously located in communities of concern because it's cheaper to locate there. And communities of concern are less likely to have the medical resources and education regarding the physical and mental hazards of smoking and vaping. Now is the time for our county to hold the course. No more stores that sell tobacco, marijuana, or CBD smoking and vaping products in our county. Thank you for hearing my concerns this morning.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller.
Hi, my name is Michelle Walther, and I'm a voting constituent of Supervisor Monica Montgomery Esteppi, the same supervisor who continues to ignore the blatant animal cruelty in my district. Dogs in our county shelter have no beds, they're drinking algae water, and we are seeing a nonstop bloodshed of dogs being euthanized at a staggering rate, all under the alleged liar of one of the most corrupt directors this county has ever had, Director Von Morris, who breaks the law daily with zero accountability from Andrew Strong. And now, Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer is openly telling us that the county will not enforce the law. How can you guys sleep at night? So let me get this straight, Tara. You remove 2 horses for allegedly neglect, yet you leave the rest behind. So what you're telling me here is that not enough horses have died under your watch because of you. The horse that died in August died because of you, was in a condition because of you. Shame on you, Tara Remer. You should be ashamed of yourself. How can you sleep at night? Am I really the only one who sees the corruption, the complicity, and the refusal to reinforce the law on Artesian Road? The only new information I have today is I'm calling upon Andrew Strong to be removed. Horses are dying because of his animal abuse. Remer, animal abuse. Remer, the more horses are going to die because of animal abuser. Shame on you, Tara. You should be ashamed of yourself. How can you sleep at night? I will not tolerate my tax dollars to go towards this abuse. Where is the transparency going on? Why is nobody hearing us? We've been talking about this for 2 years, and it's still nothing's happened. Please take action.
Thank you. Your time is up, and we will go to our final caller.
Hi, good morning, Board of Supervisors. My name is Madison, and I'm speaking on behalf of families throughout our unincorporated communities who are asking you to take a cautious, family-focused approach when it comes to expanding marijuana storefronts. In recent years, research has become increasingly clear that today's high-potency cannabis products, especially concentrates, vapes, and dabs, are very different from the lower-potency marijuana of past decades. Studies involving large numbers of participants have shown consistent associations between high THC products and serious mental health harms, including increased risk of psychosis, addiction, and significant worsening of anxiety and depression for many users. These concerns are not abstract. They show up in families, schools, and communities. These risks are most concerning when it comes to youth. When retail access expands, so does exposure and normalization. Adolescents, whose brains are still developing, are more vulnerable to negative mental health outcomes and long-term impacts on motivation, mood, and functioning. Parents in our unincorporated areas have been clear. We do not want a rise in high-potency cannabis retail near our homes, parks, and schools. We have lived through the public health lessons of tobacco and do not want to repeat them. The decision before you is ultimately about the well-being of families. Adding more marijuana storefronts in unincorporated communities does not reduce harm. It increases it, particularly for young people. Please reject any effort to expand marijuana retail in these areas and prioritize the health and safety of families who live here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chair Lawson-Remer, that concludes the request for non-agenda public communication this morning. And again, all the remaining speakers will be heard at the conclusion of today's session.
Okay, thank you all very much. So we begin with discussion item number 1, Housing Forward, discussing housing and land use policies in the unincorporated county, development feasibility analysis findings, and a related CEQA exemption. First, before handing it to the team, I just want to acknowledge how much work has gone into this, and I know that this board requested a housing workshop quite some time ago, but we wanted to wait until we were fully seated before we had our housing workshop. So there are now 5 supervisors, and we can, I think, again, consider this really critical topic of housing that has been a high priority of all of us over the last number of years. So I'll hand the floor to our county team for our presentation, and then we'll have time for public comment and discussion. So please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair Lawson-Remer and members of the board. I'm Vince Nicoletti, Director with Planning and Development Services. Today, Jennifer Kasmer, Chief of Long Range Planning, Julie Marlette, Planning Manager with Planning and Development Services, and David Estrella, Director of Housing and Community Development Services, will be presenting on item number 1. The purpose of this item is to set the stage regarding housing in the unincorporated county and the region, providing background and policy context ahead of upcoming board decision points on initiatives related to housing. The need for housing in the unincorporated county and region is clear. The question of where and what kind of housing will have different answers from different groups. Today's workshop will include housing trends to date, what type of housing we've permitted and where it's been built, and consider future policy levers that can influence housing. While staff will present several future projects that will be before your consideration in the next year and a half, we are not requesting any specific approvals or direction today. Feedback we receive today from stakeholders and the board will be used to shape future policy initiatives before we return them to you. We will walk through today's presentation in 4 parts. First, we'll provide a housing overview, including key statistics and background. We will hear from Housing and Community Development Services on regional efforts and trends, and then we'll move into looking specifically into discussing housing in the unincorporated area. Second, we'll provide an overview of the findings and recommendations of the development feasibility analysis. Third, we'll look at key geographies where the county has land use authority to build housing and provide considerations for future housing and land use decisions. And finally, we will discuss key policy decisions that the board will be considering over the next few years related to housing, setting the stage for a discussion on board priorities within the region and unincorporated areas.
Let's start with the housing overview and look at regional statistics. These are not specific to the unincorporated area. Approximately 20% of residents in San Diego County spend more than 50% of their income on housing. As of 2024, the median home price in the region was just under $900,000, pricing many residents out of home ownership opportunities. The average asking rent in the San Diego County is $2,479 per month. The high cost and shortage of housing is a major contributor to homelessness, with 26% of the unsheltered population being over 55 and 32% experiencing homelessness for the first time. The county is responding to this need on an enterprise level by supporting housing for all through the Housing Blueprint. Across the county departments, we are working together to support the production, affordability, and accessibility of housing. PDS works on housing and other planning efforts in the unincorporated area. This is where the county has land use authority, but other efforts are happening within HHSA and individual departments like Housing and Community Development Services that support affordable housing regionally, including on county-owned land within cities. Of the areas outside of cities, only 1/3 is under county land use authority. The remainder of unincorporated areas include tribal, state, or federal lands where the county does not have land use authority. Within these areas of unincorporated land use authority, the county is required to accommodate housing to meet our regional housing needs allocation goals, also referred to as RHNA. The RHNA is a state-mandated process to plan for California's housing needs across different income levels. Between 2021 and 2029, the entire San Diego region is tasked with planning for a total of 171,685 housing units. The unincorporated county is responsible for 6,700 units, less than 4% of the region's total. It's important to note that RHNA goals represent the floor and not the ceiling. While 6,700 units is the state's expectation, the housing demand is greater, and we are working collaboratively to meet housing needs beyond our housing allocation. In addition to meeting RHNA goals, addressing homelessness is a critical part of the housing equation. According to the 2025 point-in-time count, 9,905 individuals were experiencing homelessness across the region. Expanding affordable and supportive housing to vulnerable populations is key to addressing homelessness. I'll now hand it over to David Estrella, Director of Housing and Community Development Services, to provide a wider context for affordable housing in the region.
Thank you, Julie, and good morning. As Julie mentioned, the county's role in housing is vast. While Planning and Development Services is responsible for land use policy in the unincorporated area of the county, HHSA, and specifically HCDS, supports housing efforts across the entire region. HCDS provides critical gap financing for developers through programs like the Innovative Housing Trust Fund, No Place Like Home, and other state and federal sources. Through partnerships with the Department of General Services, we are able to leverage county-owned land for affordable housing, and through our housing authority, we provide critical rental assistance programs, including the use of project-based vouchers, which are able to support permanent supportive housing. The next slides highlight the county's regional impact through deed-restricted affordable housing. The development of deed-restricted affordable housing provides long-term access to affordable homes, which leads families to greater housing stability, improved health, and a range of positive outcomes. The County of San Diego is a regional partner with an overall housing portfolio that includes $390 million in financing and more than 9,500 units, which completed will be home to more than 20,000 individuals annually. Critical to these investments in housing is the $112 million the board has invested since 2017 in the Innovative Housing Trust Fund. Of the previously mentioned 9,500 units, more than 3,000 of those were made possible due to the creation of the Innovative Housing Trust Fund. This influx of local funding, along with new state funding programs, the reimagining of county land for housing, and an increased use of project-based vouchers has created a robust pipeline of county-supported affordable housing throughout the county. Today, the affordable housing pipeline currently equals 33 developments and 2,859 units that are either currently under construction or will begin construction in the coming years. One-time funding, such as the Innovative Housing Trust Fund, is fully committed, and the availability of state and federal dollars for affordable housing is uncertain and simply insufficient to continue moving the needle towards addressing San Diego's housing crisis without dedicated and ongoing funding. As previously discussed, HCDS and PDS operate in different jurisdictions, with PDS having land use authority only in the unincorporated areas, and HCDS operating in the unincorporated areas and through the incorporated cities. We still have many opportunities to work together to increase affordable housing development together. Land use policies that support housing, such as the upcoming inclusionary housing ordinance or the density bonus program, are instrumental to the production of housing, and when paired with affordable housing financing from HCDS, can intersect to create an ecosystem favorable for affordable housing development within our unincorporated communities. Next, Julie will discuss the 2011 general plan and housing trends since 2011. Thank you.
Thank you, David. The 2011 general plan sets the long-term framework for development in the unincorporated area. The plan focused planned growth in the West, where services are available, emphasizing smart growth principles and balancing housing with conservation. Land use changes also resulted in a substantial reduction in average daily vehicle miles traveled compared to the prior plan. As the county faces increasing housing demands and evolving state priorities, understanding where and how housing has developed since 2011 provides important context. This map shows where housing permits have been issued since 2011, with the darker pink and purple dots representing the highest concentrations. Growth has been focused within the western portion of the county in areas served by imported water, and over 50% of new development occurring within villages and in areas closest to cities. Looking at housing production trends over the years, we see that housing trends may be somewhat cyclical in nature, with periods of decline and recovery. Homes completed show a general upward trend since 2011, with a pandemic-related decline and recovery consistent with state and national trends. However, a slight decline in completed homes in the unincorporated county has been observed over the past years. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, have increasingly occupied a large share of housing production, with ADUs representing 45% of the total permitted housing units in 2024. Various factors, locally, statewide, and nationally, impact housing production. Economic factors such as rising interest rates, material and labor costs, as well as fire and litigation risks, among other factors, may be contributing to the observed decline in housing production in the unincorporated county. On the other hand, funding for affordable housing projects and changes in state law to make housing development easier may be contributing to an upward trend in certain types of housing, like ADUs. Revisiting our RHNA goal for the unincorporated area, we are on track to meet the 6,700 unit allocation. However, more work is needed to meet goals for the very low income category. It's also important to note that a significant portion of our RHNA goal was met through new ADU construction. In contrast, we've seen very little development on designated RHNA sites, even those that are eligible for a streamlined by right approval process. As we prepare for the next housing element planning period, the county will likely need to identify new RHNA sites with a higher potential for redevelopment. We may also need to rezone land to successfully accommodate our new housing allocation. In recent years, California has seen significant state legislation and policy shifts focused on addressing the housing and climate crises. These include housing, climate, equity, wildfire, and VMT. From streamlining housing approvals, greenhouse gas reduction goals, renewable energy standards, and evolving policy around wildfire, the state has set ambitious statewide goals. State legislation and policy shifts have affected local agency planning, zoning, and development processes. Let's dive a little deeper into how VMT has been addressed by the county and where we stand today. Since 2020, the state has required local jurisdictions to use VMT to measure transportation impacts from development. And since then, the county has been working to establish VMT thresholds to abide by state law. In 2020, the board adopted its first transportation study guide. Following litigation, in addition to state guidance on VMT, the board rescinded the 2020 transportation study guide in 2021 and adopted an updated transportation study guide in 2022 that revised the threshold of significance to 15% below the regional average. As of today, general plan compliant projects do not need to evaluate VMT if they comply with the general plan and qualify for streamlining under CEQA 15183. The remaining housing capacity of the general plan, estimated at up to 58,000 units, would not be subject to VMT analysis and could be built subject to consideration of environmental review, infrastructure availability, and market demands. Although there is an existing pathway for housing that avoids VMT analysis and mitigation, VMT continues to be raised by industry as a key barrier affecting investments in housing within unincorporated areas. Further discussion on options for VMT will be coming forward to the board in 2026, including revising the county's transportation study guide to comply with a recent appellate court ruling to remove infill areas and small project exemptions. The board has directed a range of actions in response to state actions and to support housing. Specific to planning within the unincorporated area, the board has directed preparation of a programmatic environmental impact report to support housing streamlining within specific areas, development of a sustainable land use framework prioritizing housing alongside sustainability and equity as a core value, exploration of incorporating smart growth planning tools through existing planning efforts, and PDS to identify the key barriers to achieving housing within our VMT efficient and infill areas by conducting a development feasibility analysis. These efforts tie into the enterprise-wide efforts around housing as outlined in the housing blueprint. Next, we'll look at a recent housing study, the development feasibility analysis, and discuss the findings and actions from this study. The Development Feasibility Analysis, or DFA, was a study to identify and analyze barriers and opportunities for housing production in 4 key areas, including Buena Creek, Lakeside, Valle de Oro, Casa de Oro, and Spring Valley. These areas were selected because they were identified as having the strongest opportunity for development. These areas were evaluated as a pilot study to understand broader development opportunities and challenges. The purpose of this study was to figure out whether these areas, located close to cities and transit, can support our housing goals, and what the county can do to support housing in these areas. The findings of the DFA spotlight key barriers to housing and highlight key findings and opportunities to support housing production within unincorporated areas. The DFA identified key barriers to housing in these areas, including challenging market conditions that limit the feasibility and interest in new housing investments, limited availability of developable land, as these communities are largely built out. Also, amenities such as parks, sidewalks, bike lanes, and job centers are lacking. More broadly, regulatory barriers were identified, including the cost and complexity of the discretionary process and the existing development regulations that can make it difficult to achieve maximum densities. After key barriers and DFA findings were established, staff identified actions that could facilitate housing development and address key barriers. 8 DFA action steps were identified that the county could take, and a number of these actions align with efforts currently underway. We'll now highlight key in-process planning projects and initiatives that have alignment with DFA action steps. With each of these actions, as part of future hearings, the board will have the opportunity to ensure each effort moves toward alignment with board priorities. Prioritize infrastructure investments with demand for housing highlights a long-term strategy to prioritize funding and infrastructure investments in areas where it will provide the greatest return on investment. A local VMT mitigation program could be one mechanism to develop a funding stream through mitigation fees to support implementation of active transportation improvements. The Sustainable Land Use Framework could also consider opportunities to prioritize and plan for investments that best align with positive housing outcomes. 2 action steps that speak to DFA-specific planning efforts and workforce development would be carried forward as part of the Sustainable Land Use Framework, in addition to ongoing economic development efforts working with our partners in the county's Economic Development and Government Affairs Department. Another 2 action steps to expand land availability for housing and advocate for housing legislation would be supported by the Sustainable Land Use Framework and the Housing Blueprint, in addition to ongoing efforts of the county legislative program. Amend and align county regulations is a key implementation action of the housing element and a priority issue raised by DFA stakeholders. This action, being pursued under the Housing Unlocked project, will ensure zoning standards are aligned so that maximum general densities can be achieved. Additionally, PDS has launched a zoning ordinance suggestion form online to gather ongoing feedback from stakeholders to facilitate updates to the zoning ordinance and ensure consistency with county goals for housing. Fast-track housing permitting and boost resources for housing would be advanced with the grading ordinance and by right housing program, along with the housing blueprint. And lastly, the adoption of an inclusionary housing ordinance could offer a new funding stream for affordable housing. That effort, combined with other efforts aligned with the housing blueprint and HCDS efforts, would support funding to build more affordable housing. Looking closely at these efforts, each project affects housing and has key anticipated outcomes. A VMT mitigation program can add both transparency and certainty for developers. The inclusionary housing ordinance supports the production of and funding for deed-restricted affordable housing. The separate sale of ADU program can support more opportunities for attainable home ownership. The grading and by right housing program will provide a pathway for by right housing within VMT efficient and infill areas. Housing Unlocked will update the zoning ordinance to add greater flexibility for different housing types. The Senior Housing and Starter Homes project also focuses on providing accessible and attainable housing. The Sustainable Land Use Framework is a holistic effort that will identify opportunities to advance board priorities around sustainability and equity, including those related to housing. And all these efforts support the countywide vision for housing under the Housing Blueprint, with the Housing Blueprint involving both unincorporated area and regional efforts to support housing.
Our third section of the presentation will look at key geographies within areas where the county has land use jurisdiction. We will review high and very high fire hazard severity zones, key general plan geographies, VMT efficient and infill areas, and the CAP smart growth geographies. These areas are highlighted due to alignments with the general plan, prior board direction, and state policy priorities. However, in the context of land use, the board can consider other geographies beyond those presented in this section. The discussion of geographies is intended to help frame the various considerations to be evaluated when considering land use and housing decisions into the future. Recognizing planning for wildfire safety is critical as we look to accommodating housing into the future. Some context setting is needed to understand the purpose and implications of wildfire risk mapping. 83% of the unincorporated area is within high and very high fire hazard severity zones. However, high fire hazard areas are not unique to unincorporated areas. For example, 65% of the city of San Diego, including highly populated areas, are located within high or very high fire hazard severity zones. Areas mapped as high or very high fire hazard severity zones trigger mandatory building code requirements such as fire hardening and fire sprinklers. Fire hazard mapping can also support local planning considerations, such as where more stringent fire protection measures may be needed. High and very high fire hazard severity zones also overlap with the areas where the state is prioritizing housing, shown in blue on the slide. These maps and statistics emphasize the widespread nature of high fire hazard areas and highlights that high fire hazard severity mapping is a planning tool that can be used to ensure fire safety is prioritized alongside housing. Now let's look closer at housing opportunities and land use within unincorporated areas. At the core of the general plan is the community development model. The model includes 3 categories. The village category, shown in red, are the planned growth areas where infrastructure and services are largely available. The semi-rural category represents a transitional land use pattern between urban and suburban areas, while rural lands are areas where limited growth is anticipated due to prioritizing conservation of sensitive resources. The board has provided direction to consider how to prioritize growth in key geographies, such as areas with low VMT. In the next slides, we'll look at different geographies more closely to understand their potential to support housing and to consider how future policy decisions may affect where housing goes into the future. The first geography are the villages, shown in dark red outline. These are locations designed to accept growth and are areas designed to offer unincorporated residents access to local goods and services. The village boundary areas are generally aligned with existing community centers and are intended for higher density housing and a broad mix of land uses. Some villages are located within VMT efficient and infill areas, and because large parts of the unincorporated area are in high and very high fire hazard severity zones, many villages are also within these zones. Remaining housing capacity in the villages is estimated at about 15,000 homes. However, certain constraints, including those outlined in the DFA, make it unlikely that this level of development would be realized in the near term. The second geography is the VMT efficient and infill areas located near transportation corridors, jobs, and services. This geography is shown in blue. These are priority areas for growth because they reduce driving, lower emissions, and make efficient use of existing land and infrastructure. Housing in these areas supports state climate goals, although there is ongoing legal uncertainty about how VMT rules apply to infill areas. While these areas have some capacity for housing, estimated at 7,000 to 8,000 homes, the DFA highlighted the gap between theoretical capacity and what is actually feasible to build. Infrastructure is generally in place here, but land availability is limited, and market demand has not been strong enough to drive substantial housing investments in these areas. The third geography includes areas that are VMT efficient and also outside of high and very high fire hazard severity zones. Zoomed in, you can see the limited areas in yellow that meet this criteria. This geography covers just over 3,000 acres and has a theoretical development capacity of 1,000 to 2,000 homes. However, DFA findings showed that the likelihood of achieving those levels of growth are low due to both market factors and because these areas are largely developed. As part of the Climate Action Plan hearings, these areas were identified as areas to explore incentives for development. Opportunities to prioritize growth in these areas are being evaluated through the Sustainable Land Use Framework and other initiatives. The intent is to ensure these areas have the lowest barriers to growth and include the greatest incentives. These geographies are presented to provide context to support a conversation about housing into the future. Next, we'll turn to a look ahead at key policy opportunities related to housing. This will include a look at future policy decisions and key projects the board will be considering over the next few years and how these may support housing for the region. There are several key projects that will entail board policy considerations. Next year, the board will hear options for a VMT mitigation program. This hearing will consider options for VMT mitigation and will consider how unincorporated area policies on VMT can support housing. Later in 2026, staff will bring forward the inclusionary housing ordinance. The board will consider when inclusionary housing requirements apply and the level and amount of affordable housing units to require. The board will have several opportunities to support housing streamlining and can consider where and under what circumstances to support streamlining. The grading ordinance and by right housing program is emphasizing streamlining in VMT efficient and infill areas and is expected to return to the board in spring 2027. The Sustainable Land Use Framework will also include opportunities to support development incentives in certain areas, such as within smart growth alternative areas. Finally, as a part of all of these actions, the board can influence key policy priorities related to land use and housing. Next, we will dive in a bit deeper into policy opportunities related to VMT mitigation, inclusionary housing ordinance, and the sustainable land use framework. For VMT mitigation, the board will consider whether to develop a local fee mitigation program and will also hear about efforts to address VMT regionally and at the state level. With a local program, the board can consider a mitigation program that includes adoption of a statement of overriding considerations to help overcome VMT as a barrier to housing while requiring mitigation to the extent feasible. As program options are considered, we will evaluate how county VMT policy will affect housing feasibility, ensuring stakeholder input is considered. Staff will be coming to the board next year to present an inclusionary housing ordinance. When considering the inclusionary housing ordinance, the board will have several considerations, including how many and what types of housing projects will be required to include affordable housing, how many affordable housing units each project will be required to provide, and at what affordability level. Program adoption could result in increased production of deed-restricted affordable homes and dedicated revenue for additional affordable housing if an in-lieu fee is adopted. The inclusionary housing ordinance is a required program of the housing element and a key policy highlighted in the housing blueprint and the DFA. Staff will be returning to the board next year with options for a sustainable land use framework. Staff will be considering planning tools to align local planning with state legislation and policy shifts around land use, VMT, and sustainability. A focused general plan update may be recommended to build on the sustainability principles of the existing general plan while incorporating updates to align with VMT and ensure our plans and policies are current. A focused general plan update could also align with upcoming state-mandated element updates and set us up for land use changes that may be needed as we head into the 2029 housing element planning cycle. More broadly, there will be opportunities to support housing while balancing sustainability and equity goals, including the direction on smart growth alternatives. To close today's presentation, we are providing a snapshot of upcoming board touch points that relate to housing within the unincorporated area. Additional policy context will be shared with each upcoming item to ensure the board has the information needed to make informed decisions that advance housing goals while balancing key priorities. This concludes our presentation, and staff is available for questions.
Thank you so much. I know this reflects a huge amount of work and a lot of different threads that have come together. So before we go to public comment, I just want to create some space for any of my colleagues if they have any specific questions. Go ahead, please, Supervisor.
I appreciate the presentation. It's very informative and a lot of information. I did have just a quick question that caught my eye on slide 28. And the vehicle miles traveled portion there. It says local fee program. So what a local fee program is that? Like Melrose, or what are you looking at for a local fee program?
Supervisor Desmond, through the chair. Right now, we're working with our consultants to look at options on what a local VMT mitigation program would look like. One of those options does include a fee program, similar to our previous transportation impact fee program, where development projects move forward, and in order to mitigate VMT, they would pay a fee. Those fees then are used to provide infrastructure improvements like sidewalks and bike lanes that would ultimately mitigate those VMT impacts from that particular project.
So is that like in lieu of actually building the project, you pay a fee so that it goes into a pool and we can, okay. All right, thanks.
Supervisor Geary.
Thank you, Chair, and great job. Thank you for the very thorough presentation. I have a quick question on slide 10, if you can go back to slide 10. Just to clarify, if I'm understanding this graph correctly, County of San Diego outpaces housing construction outpaces California and outpaces the western region, correct?
Through the chair, on this slide, the blue line is the unincorporated county for our permit numbers within what we're processing in planning and development services. That yellow, gold line, as you're referring to, is, I would describe it as the regional trend. So if that was the way the question was being asked regionally, it is higher than the other jurisdictions.
So the entire county is outpacing the western region and the state?
That would be correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It's just sometimes there's narratives that we're falling behind, but as a county, we're outpacing.
I want to, if I could again, just make sure I'm clarifying myself. The blue line would be
The unincorporated.
the
right?
unincorporated,
Yes.
the gold line would be regionally.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I know we have a couple more community presentations, so I will be quick. Question, well, first let me say, we are joined by Morse High School up in the rafters. And so all of you can't see the students, but I just have to shout them out. From Southeastern San Diego, Morse High School, thank you so much for being here. The general plan villages, there was a mention of 15,000 homes. Is that 15,000 homes that were originally planned for through a previous general plan that are no longer in our projections based on current state law, or is that, I just want to be clear. It's slide number 23, but it was in the, it's not anywhere listed in this slide, but it was discussed during that slide.
Vice Chair, that amount reflects what we believe to be the remaining capacity based upon the current zoning designations.
Okay. Okay, so, okay.
If I could clarify on behalf of the team, the general plan overall, I believe, had a 58,000 unit capacity.
That is correct.
And these are remaining units, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And just for, there's discussion around the in lieu fees. Generally, I have not been a proponent of those. I do feel that there are several violations of federal law which encourages integration, and I do believe that the impact of in lieu fees does promote segregation. So I just want to make that clear moving forward. I'm not going to be a proponent of in lieu fees, but I know we'll have more discussion later. Thank you.
I have a similar question actually to my colleague, Vice Chair Montgomery Stepp. I was trying to get clear on that number of, based on our existing general plan, how much more capacity do we have for additional units?
We estimate the remaining capacity across the unincorporated area where we have jurisdiction is around 58,000 units.
So we have capacity to build 58,000 additional units. I'm just uplifting that. I'm uplifting that because to me, the whole conversation that I'm interested in is what can we do to unlock building these 58,000 units? Like, it's already zoned for that, it's already planned for that, it's in the general plan. And just, I want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding. So for those 58,000 units of capacity that we already have, none of those would be subject to VMT requirements, is that correct?
Chair Lawson-Remer, that's correct. Projects that are consistent with our general plan, they are able to streamline using the 15183 CEQA exemption, and they are not required to analyze or mitigate for VMT.
So we have 58,000, capacity for 58,000 units that would not have to mitigate for VMT whatsoever. So this analysis you're coming forward with in a few months regarding VMT mitigation would apply only to plans that are not compliant with our general plan, or only to projects not compliant with their general plan that have to come to the board for a vote?
Chair Lawson-Remer, that's correct. There are some nuances to it. So it wouldn't necessarily just be housing projects that we're talking about. It could be other types of uses as well. They're just not factored into the general plan at that level of detail. Those projects may require VMT analysis and mitigation. So it isn't just housing projects that could be included, but you're correct. For projects that are not consistent with our general plan, they would need to analyze VMT and potentially mitigate.
Okay, so this conversation around VMT is really limited to only projects that are not consistent with our general plan that would have to come to the board for a discretionary vote because it's not consistent with the general plan. But projects that are consistent with the general plan, the 58,000 housing units, would not have to do VMT mitigation. I just want to make sure I'm understanding, because this is definitely different, right? Like, this is a different thing than where we were 2 years ago.
Chair, that is correct, and this is based on recent case law that provided guidance to jurisdictions on how to implement VMT. But you're accurate in that assessment, the way that you summarized it. The only nuance I would provide is there are other types of uses that require conditional use permits. Those aren't necessarily housing projects. They would not necessarily come to the board. They may also require VMT analysis
Can you give
and
us an
mitigation.
example?
For instance, like a private school on a piece of property was not included in our county general plan. That particular project would need to likely analyze VMT and provide mitigation if necessary.
Okay, so we still need to do this VMT mitigation conversation because there are certain projects, but it's essentially functionally irrelevant for, not irrelevant's a little bit too strong, but marginal for the housing conversation, because we're really talking about 58,000 units that are not, I mean, not that this is an important thing to have, I just want to make sure if we're talking about, I want to make sure I'm understanding, because this is super different. 2 years ago, we were really worried about all this housing that wasn't going to be able to get built because it was going to have to do all this VMT mitigation. And I think what I'm hearing you say is because of the court ruling, the new court ruling, those 58,000 units are now not subject to VMT, but we thought that they were before.
Chair, that is accurate. I do think we need to be transparent enough to say that what we often hear, though, from many of our customers is the legal landscape can change in the future. And so while that is certainly the environment we are operating in right now, we have heard interest that it would be good to still continue development of a VMT mitigation program should we ever have a need based on any legal dynamics changing in the future.
That makes total sense. We got to anticipate that things might change. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Perfectly, I totally agree. Wasn't implying we shouldn't work on VMT mitigation. I was just trying to center on my kind of big question that I hope we can understand today is why we're not building housing on these 58,000 units, and what can we do to unlock that?
And Chair, I think we'll hear a lot of customer feedback today on that as well, but I would also note there are still many other constraints that, as we noted in the presentation, fire still being a major constraint that we have, among others that are out there in the county. So we have many other constraints that are not just VMT that are playing influences on these projects, as well as things that are outside of the land use framework. We still have labor costs. We have a number of other legal challenges that occur to projects. So the feedback we hear is it is quite complex. And while VMT is a large topic that is discussed on projects advancing, it is not the only concern that we see on projects as we review them.
Super helpful. Thank you. That was great. Very helpful just for me to focus. And then just kind of going back to this map. So the 58,000, where are those houses, or where will they be once we figure out how to build them? Like on this map.
When we're talking about the 58,000, they are spread across the unincorporated area within the white areas where we do have the land use jurisdiction. A majority of those are going to be in the areas outlined in red, where we identify the villages, but also in our semi-rural and some within our rural areas, because there are development potential in those areas, be it much less than within the villages.
Okay. Okay. And how many of them are in the VMT efficient infill areas? The blue.
We estimate between 7,000 to 8,000 within the VMT efficient and infill areas.
How many?
7,000 to 8,000.
Okay. Thank you. Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you. I just had a follow-up. Has the 15183 been tested yet?
Supervisor Desmond, through the chair, we have projects in process right now that are going to be utilizing it, but at this point, none have gone forward.
So none. So even though we say they're able to do it, nobody has yet. And then could you go back to, I was going back, Supervisor Gary's question on slide 10. So the county, the unincorporated area is the blue line. And it looks like the blue line was following all the other trends there, but it looks like 2022-ish, all the other indicators are going up, and the unincorporated area of San Diego County is dropping like a rock. So what happened there?
Through the chair, at about that time, we had several larger projects, tracks that were under construction that we're completing, and those have phased out at that point, seeing a decline in those types of projects.
So it didn't have anything to do with VMT, that drop off?
Yeah, it would be challenging to isolate any one factor as the causal factor for a change. We certainly hear VMT is a force that had played into that for projects coming in, but other factors that we hear are labor costs, other legal challenges, and other factors. But we can present the data in terms of what we're seeing from a statistical perspective.
Well, we want it because it seems like we would like to turn that around. And if it's just, so you're saying, well, okay, a lot of larger projects completed, so we got no new ones really in the pipeline, except I guess the Harmony Grove that we just approved.
I'm going to let my colleague Mark Slovic speak to that.
Supervisor Desmond, through the chair. We took a look at what we have in process right now, and it is over 4,000 units in the discretionary permit process that are, actively pursuing their permits. So potentially those could move forward in the next couple of years for entitlements, and then eventually move forward with building permits, although it is difficult in terms to try to predict the timing.
Well, it's just kind of, I'm trying to grasp why those other lines all had the same similar situations, and I get there are blips and ups and downs, but we seem to be going the wrong direction.
If it's useful, just one other consideration. That court decision that we noted regarding the VMT and 15183, that came out about a year ago. And so there was uncertainty up to that point, and even now when we have meetings with our stakeholders on a regular basis, we are still pointing out this 15183 approach that we can take on projects moving forward. So I think you noted the uncertainty. I think that's absolutely a factor in the landscape right now.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we went through this analysis a few years ago, we did the analysis without looking at topography. We did the analysis looking at what could be, and have we made any adjustments? So there were two issues that I took specific properties because they were in my district at the time. One, it was a cliff, and it was unbuildable, but we had it listed as buildable. Then the other one was there was a home on it, but it showed that we could put 20 units. And the notion that somebody was going to tear down their home with a prayer that they'll have a permit that holds and they can rebuild 20 units inside their lifetime wasn't likely because of lawsuits and other things that may occur. We haven't adjusted for those types of items in this analysis when thinking of the 58,000 homes, correct?
In the reference to the 58,000 homes, that does not take in specific site constraints and conditions. However, as an illustrative example, based on your feedback in that situation in the past, we initiated the development feasibility analysis project that looked at 4 communities that are VMT efficient. That project itself that we highlighted today did take ground conditions into context, understanding what is buildable based on redevelopment scenarios as well. I'm going to let my colleague Rami speak a little bit further about what that DFA is, and I would just again say it's an illustrative example for 4 sample areas, but it does not represent the entire county.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor. And so we did focus in 4 communities to do this on-the-ground level analysis to see what could be built. And within those areas, a majority of the sites have been built on, with very few vacant parcels being present. But we were able to identify that some of those sites are ready for redevelopment in terms of the value of the land exceeded the value of the structures on those parcels. And that's a factor that is taken into consideration when redevelopment occurs. And with that, the expectation or the estimate was that in the 4 communities, there could be up to 6,700 units that could be developed. And this is just a small slice of the area that we took a look at. But the assessment that sites that were built on would likely not redevelop because of the costs and because of the market conditions.
Thank you very much for that.
That's helpful. I had a very similar question about, can you actually build the houses where they say that we can build them? So that's very helpful. Thank you. I just had one other question. There seems to be sort of two strands here, right? It's the work that we've been doing to build housing on our county-owned land that we don't get credit for, quote unquote, because it's not in the unincorporated. And then the work that we're doing to try to unlock more housing development opportunities where we have land use authority. So I'm wondering if there's any way to better capture, how do I say this? If you go back to that like line that I think my colleague was rightly concerned about the cliff, where we seem to have like slowed down our housing development right here. Do we have another version of this that gives us basically credit, more or less, for the, how many units, 3,500 or something we built on county-owned land?
Chair, we do not have another version of this in this presentation. I think to the direction there may be helpful to note, one of the legislative changes that we are pursuing is looking at how we as a county where we have made significant investments of county building homes, often affordable housing homes in other cities, can seek to capture credit for those in our RENA numbers as we're moving forward, recognizing that, again, it is a very regional approach to building the housing.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, and I think there's a value to that. I just meant more for our own analytical purposes, that I think that what you identified sounds to me rings true, that there was like uncertainty around VMT until the new ruling, the 15183 ruling came out, and so that seemed to see to slow down. But we also had like a huge acceleration in our own development on our county-owned land. So I just want to make sure we're giving ourselves credit for some good work, and that isn't like fully reflected here. Not to say we can't and should not be doing a whole heck of a lot more.
What we could do is when we come back every spring, we do our general plan annual progress report. We could work to develop a graphic that looks at our housing for the unincorporated, which is what we report out in the general plan annual progress report. We could work with our colleagues in HCDS to develop a graphic that shows what we're doing as well with housing within the cities. I think
maybe like a
that
combined number, like our county housing progress that includes both. So, Supervisor Geary.
Thank you. I think I was going to ask a specific question about the developable area in Spring Valley. I don't know if you have that number, the specific number of units for that. But I want to piggyback on what the chair's comments were, because I am, and this is, I'll wait till after public comment, but I'm more interested. I'm interested, obviously, in making sure we meet our goals and, when we move forward with our RENA numbers in the unincorporated areas. But I think that we also need to have a broader discussion, whether it's pursuing legislation or not. Maybe it's just leading through a framework. And we need to focus also on where we can build housing that's not necessarily in unincorporated areas, but within the city's jurisdictions. If we can pursue legislation that would give us credit, that's fine. But at the end of the day, centering people, for me, is the most important thing. And at least for my district, there are very limited, obviously, opportunities for housing development. So we're going to have to start thinking more regionally and in partnership with our jurisdictions. But I have a lot more to say about that later. My specific questions about the number of units in Spring Valley. And you don't need to give them to me now. We can wait after public comment.
Well, let's wait. Let's get your numbers. It's an important question.
We're pulling those up, and we can have those ready after.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay. Okay, why don't we go to public comment, and then we can continue board discussion.
Thank you, Chair Lawson-Remer. We do have 30 total requests to speak, 20 individuals in person, and 10 requesting to speak by phone. That also includes 3 group presentations. Also like to note for the record, we did receive 7 e-comments on this item. 1 was in opposition and 6 were neutral. For any individuals that requested to speak on this item by phone, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We will begin with the group presentations. You will have 10 minutes to address the board. All 3 members of the group must speak during that 10 minutes. Please self-regulate your time with the timer on the podium. And I'd like to invite forward the first group presentation that includes the following individuals: Dan Silver, Susan Baldwin, and Michael Beck. As a reminder, each person in the group may speak for no more than 4 minutes. As you come forward, if you could please state your name at the podium before you begin your presentation.
Good morning, Chair and board members. I'm Dan Silver with Endangered Habitats League. We support the DFA recommendations, but given the underwhelming potential found in the DFA, what is the path forward? EHL recommends a renewed focus on development in the village categories. First, I'll set the stage. Next, a former Sandag planner will provide regulatory context. And finally, a former planning commissioner will point to the future. Before the 2011 update, the entire unincorporated area was zoned to the horizon for inefficient, environmentally destructive, and high-cost housing, estate lots. Multifamily dwellings were illegal. After 2011, after momentous up-planning and down-planning and hundreds of community meetings, you had a sustainable framework of higher density walkable towns and low density rural greenbelts. Towns and greenbelts, an historic accomplishment. But the county did not go on to realize the potential of either the villages or the greenbelts. Under a prior regime, it went badly off course. For the villages, it did not do the necessary consistency zoning. Instead, energy was spent on divisive general plan amendments for sprawl that leapfrogged out of villages into fire zones. Litigation, ballot measures, and loss of public confidence followed. We need a different direction, one which reinvigorates the sound village planning envisioned by your general plan. Village development is walkable, and even if not perfect, far better for VMT. And building at modest densities, affordable townhomes in the 10 to 15 dwelling units per acre range is preferable to high-rises that exist only on paper. But the other side of the coin is equally important. The form development should not take, that is, develop GPAs outside of villages. We must keep San Diego's defining green belts of habitat and agriculture intact. The wisdom of the general plan must be embraced as a whole, not in part. Your board must say both yes and no. And while we favor expediting and streamlining village capacity, we do not necessarily want to expedite semi-rural and rural capacity for VMT, fire, habitat, and agricultural concerns. I will turn it over to the regulatory speaker.
Good morning, Honorable Board of Supervisors. My name is Susan Baldwin, and I'm a retired planner who worked at the City of La Mesa, the City of San Diego, and Sandag for 27 years, where I prepared 3 regional housing needs assessments. I'm here to provide information on the county's housing needs, which are documented in Sandag's current regional growth forecast and in the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, also known as RHNA, and how well those needs are being addressed. All the region's recent planning documents, the 2011 County General Plan, its 2021-29 housing element, Sandag's draft 2025 regional plan, and Series 15 growth forecast, and the current RHNA and the land use plans for the region's 18 cities are in alignment with the goal of planning for most of the region's housing in the region's urbanized areas. The areas with better transit and transportation options, more employment opportunity, and lower wildfire risk. During the past 20-plus years, the region's plans, including those of the county, have shifted to support the state and regional goals of reducing sprawl development and promoting more efficient land use by allocating most housing and employment growth to the cities and less to the unincorporated area where there is a paucity of transit, few jobs, and higher fire risk. In short, our region's plans, if implemented, will help meet our greenhouse gas emission targets and result in shorter commutes, lower vehicle miles traveled, and preservation of our precious agricultural lands and forests. I've prepared several slides, 2 slides that show the county's role in meeting the housing needs of the region and how it is doing well in meeting those needs now and in the future. The first slide is up now. Slide 1 shows the Series 15 regional growth forecast with a projected increase of nearly 13,000 units in the unincorporated area, and the county's own housing production and capacity portal, which shows the county general plan has more than an adequate remaining capacity, 4 times greater, almost 60,000 units, as has been discussed earlier today. As shown, slide 2, please. As shown in the county's most recent 2024 Housing Element Annual Progress Report, where we're halfway through the RHNA cycle, and housing element cycle, the county has issued enough building permits to meet or exceed its RHNA numbers, except in the very low income category, which is at 24%. These numbers show that the county is on the right track in meeting its housing needs. It also shows the really significant need for adopting the inclusionary housing ordinance as soon as possible to help address its very low income needs. Thank you, and I will turn it over to Michael Beck.
Good morning. To close the circle, to close the circle today, we'd like to offer some thoughts and suggestions on what went right and to reinforce those issues and offer some suggestions on moving forward in implementing the plan that was adopted now 14 years ago. As a planning commissioner, I participated during the long involved update process, which ultimately resulted in a generally strong, visionary general plan. But to be realized, any plan, especially a general plan, needs a commitment to principle, an implementation strategy, and the tools to carry it out. As the update process wound down, the 2 implementation strategies were highlighted or became highlighted as necessary next steps. These have yet to be realized. The zoning ordinance update is the first one, and of course is essential to integrate the underlying zoning with the new land use plan. And the second is to complete the community plan updates, because after all, a general plan, among other things, is a collection of community plans. Today, particularly after staff presentation, today is clearly an opportunity to reset, and we want to suggest some concrete actions that will address the issues with a primary focus on the primary vehicle to meet the housing numbers, which was and is the village development, planning, permitting, and implementation. To that end, we have 7 recommendations. Some of these are, none of these are inconsistent with the staff presentation. Some of them are reinforcing some of what staff has already shared with you today, but I'd like to offer our focus topic areas. The first is to remove process barriers for village development. This is like resetting on that whole process and re-examining it. The second is to create incentives for development of small, specific plans. The third is to examine strategies for permit streamlining. Again, staff highlighted this issue. The fourth is to develop a village master plan for evacuation planning. As we all know, this wildfire issue is with us for the foreseeable forever, probably, and we really need to do master plan evacuation planning for the villages. The fifth is to examine housing for families. Really challenging in the villages when you're trying to get high density, but it's something that we shouldn't ignore, and there is definitely a need there. And finally, we appreciate the strong work to date that's been done on the inclusionary housing. Again, reinforcing what has been said today, but we think that that's an essential step. Sounds like staff is moving in that direction, but we want to reinforce the need for that. At the end of the day, and beyond the raw housing numbers, this is about building communities by providing a program that local communities and the development community can depend on to realize the vision of village living. And to that end, our final recommendation has to do with consistency zoning for the villages at a high but realistic density. EHL would like to see the highest density possible because of all the ancillary benefits to the issues that we care about, but it has to be realistic and implementable, and we really encourage staff and this whole process to listen to developers who are here today in support of village development, who really want to make this plan work. That of the gears that are necessary, that's one of the keys.
Thank you, sir. Your time's up. All right, we will go to the second group. I'd like to invite forward Sean Kilkenny, Lori Holt, I believe it's Pfeffler. My apologies if I mispronounced that, and Stephanie Benvenido. Again, you'll have 10 minutes to address the board, and no one person can speak more than 4 minutes.
All right. Good morning, Honorable Chair Lawson-Remer and County Supervisors. My name is Lori Holt-Filer, and I am the CEO of the Building Industry Association of San Diego. Our membership represents over 20,000 workers across San Diego with the mission of supporting pro-housing policies and solutions. And we thank you for this opportunity and this important discussion. We've been looking forward to it for a long time. With me today are Stephanie Benvenuto, our Director of Policy, and Sean Kilkenny, a BIA board member and founding partner of Nolan Communities, and our Nick Lee, our incoming chair, is with us as well. Preliminarily, the BIA believes a healthy housing market represents a diversity of buyers and renters, provides equitable access to different housing opportunities, and is inclusive of all communities in the region. Not just 4. We agree with many findings in the DFA, including the high cost, time, and uncertainty of the discretionary review process, the inconsistency between the outdated zoning ordinance and the village-based general plan, and the need to focus more housing in the 7.3 to 15 units per acre range instead of higher densities over 20 units per acre. So next slide. Our feedback and recommendations were shaped by former chair's direction in August 2024 on the inclusionary housing ordinance, asking for staff to return with an implementation strategy focused on integrating all the moving pieces related to housing to provide opportunities for home ownership, stable, affordable housing for middle-income communities, and that would create generational wealth and close the income gap. Next slide. We agree and support a comprehensive approach. The county has nearly a dozen housing-related policies, programs, plans, reports, and analysis currently under development and review, but they all start with and are guided by the 2000 General Plan. We can't forget how progressive the General Plan update was in 2011. It was smart growth. The General Plan update is based on a population distribution strategy which focuses housing in areas where infrastructure and services are available, near existing cities, away from fire-prone areas, and sensitive habitat. It prioritizes environmentally beneficial objectives and includes reducing vehicle miles traveled. In fact, the general plan reduces vehicle miles traveled by 13.5% compared to the general plan. Next, Stephanie Benvenuto will continue this conversation.
Good morning. Building off of what Lori just said, unfortunately, the vision that was set out in the general plan, the one for vibrant villages and town centers serving as neighborhood hubs that would support medium and high density areas, has not been realized, as we've covered today. That vision, which demonstrated the county's leadership and sustainability, is one we know this board agrees with. Next slide. Consistent with our members' experiences, the DFA identifies systemic barriers in the county that have prevented the development of the much-needed housing despite record high home prices and until recently, all-time low interest rates. Next slide, please. Discretionary permits have plummeted in the county from a 4-year average of 605 to just 157 as of 2024. As the county's own data indicate, an ever-growing number of housing units permitted, and was covered by staff today, are ADUs. Since 2021, they've grown from 21% to now 45% of the building permits issued. These units account for 59.3% of the county's claimed very low income units and 42.7% of the county's low-income units, even though these ADUs do not have official deed restrictions on them. In fact, we've only issued 128 permits for the actually deed-restricted housing since 2021, an average of 32 units per year. Next slide, please. As a result of not producing enough housing in San Diego, over 47,000 workers commute from Riverside to San Diego for work. This represents over 1 billion VMT that San Diego is basically exporting each year to Riverside. This equates to more than 57,000 homes worth of GHG emissions. The DFA partially explains why this is the case, and we agree with its findings that the zoning ordinance is outdated, overly complex, and flatly inconsistent with the general plan, in direct violation of state law. The discretionary process is too costly and time-consuming, and regulations are too complicated. There is too much uncertainty, including uncertainty around VMT, but we are very heartened by some of that earlier conversation. I would like to highlight that. Market conditions do not support higher density development. Higher density is more expensive to build, and revenues are too low to justify those costs. Redevelopment of underutilized parcels is more expensive and difficult, and the amount of readily available developable vacant land is limited. Many areas in the county lack the necessary amenities, parks, jobs, infrastructure, and retail/commercial uses that are desired by new residents. Next. To be clear, we are deeply appreciative of the immense amount of work that has gone into today's report and the reports that precede it. We have been in regular and frequent communication with staff and very much appreciate their time and expertise. The BIA, more specifically though, has prepared a comprehensive housing implementation plan and strategy, which we lovingly call CHIPS, which is both a near-term action plan and long-term policy document to build new housing in village areas. And I'll hand that over to Sean Kilkenny to walk through.
Good morning, Supervisors. As Stephanie mentioned, the BIA has put together the Comprehensive Housing Implementation Plan and Strategy, which is focused on near-term, medium-term, and long-term actions dedicated to trying to improve the production of housing in the unincorporated county. Next slide, please. Near-term actions are anticipated to be able to be completed within 12 months and were formulated based on policies that don't require further environmental review but can instead largely rely upon the Great Analysis and the General Plan Update Program, EIR, conducted in 2011. These actions include updating the zoning ordinance to facilitate village development, with annual updates thereafter soliciting industry input on what additional changes could facilitate further improvements. Expanding the Buy Right program and updating RENA sites to include all village areas to bestow the benefits of state law within the villages. Developing a land use overlay on properties with higher than 20 unit per acre zoning to allow for a lower, more moderate density of zoning, which is feasible under the findings of the DFA. Expanding the removing barriers to housing item to cover all village areas and projects. Eliminating the requirement for public disclosure for CEQA addendums and exemptions. Adopting an inclusionary housing ordinance with a 5-year phase-in and alternative compliance options. And then developing a flat fee structure for projects in village areas as opposed to a deposit-based full cost recovery system. Next slide, please. In the medium term, these are actions anticipated to take between 12 and 24 months because they require some additional community feedback and potential CEQA review. They include conducting a comprehensive impact fee review for all county and county servicing districts on impact fees, reviewing board policy I-1 against state density bonus requirements, developing a programmatic GHG and VMT mitigation bank for local offsets for GPA and rezone projects, and then allowing self-certification for additional permits and making certain approvals and permits ministerial instead of discretionary. Next slide, please. Finally, long-term actions that are expected to take more than 24 months, all with the intent of setting up this county for the best possible success for the 7th cycle housing element update, which would include consideration for a general plan amendment on less efficient land uses, including SR 0.5, SR1, and SR2 designated land uses, to either moderate density village-based land uses or lower intensity semi-rural and rural land uses. Next slide, please. We believe our feedback on the DFA and the CHIPS program will support efforts to create an abundance of housing that can build generational wealth and close the income gap, serving the diverse communities of our region in an equitable and inclusive way. We believe that providing housing for everyone is the right thing to do, and we've submitted our detailed plan, which we've tried to briefly summarize this morning. We encourage you, the county, to adopt our proposal and are ready to collaborate on ways to ensure that no time is lost in implementing these much-needed solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to our final group presentation. I'd like to invite forward Ginger Hiskey, Georgette Gomez, and Jose Lopez. Just a reminder, you'll have 10 minutes and no one person can speak for more than 4 minutes.
Just give us a second while we connect. Good morning. Yes, good morning, supervisors. My name is Georgette Gomez, and I'm here with some of my colleagues in this work. And I have this presentation, but after listening to what's been being said and shared, there's a lot to say after. So I'm going to stick with the presentation, but perhaps I can follow up and have further discussions, because I think there's a really good opportunity to do right for our residents in the region. And I don't say this in this presentation, but I need to uplift it and acknowledge it, that if we don't get it right, the outcome of that is we have over 70,000 people that are crossing the border in a daily manner because we don't have enough housing in our region that is affordable. That's impacting San Isidro, which is the community that I get to work in through Casa Familiar. Not only are they getting impacted overall their quality of life, having to cross the border daily, and that's increasing. It's taking about 3 hours to cross the border. So 3 hours coming in, 3 hours going back, that's 6 hours, right? Perhaps in a good day, it could be 3 hours. It could be 4 hours, but it could be 6 hours round in, round out, right? Let's imagine that. Now, what does that do to the air quality, right? And where is that air going? It's going to San Isidro, impacting the community that is here and people's health. So that is the outcome of, if we don't get this right, the outcome of that is just going to continue to rise. So this conversation is exciting, but it's also concerning because we're talking about the same solutions. Affordable housing, and perhaps there's going to be a in-lieu fee discussion. We're talking about VMT, and as some of you know, I was a council member a few years back where we were talking about those same things. We need an opportunity to think more creatively and to be able to do things differently. We cannot continue recycling the same policies and expect a different outcome, because we need to do more. So, presentation. And that was not in mine. We have a challenge, right? And I won't talk about it anymore because it's been talked about. But we have an opportunity to really keep families in their homes, stabilize by stabilizing rent and prevent displacement, preserve existing affordable housing, build permanent community ownership, and also really create true equity to access all types of housings and so forth. So what do we need to do? And I have to say, this is not, a lot of what I'm going to cover here, where we're going to cover, is not super innovative. I'm also recycling some of those conversations, so I need to acknowledge that myself. that we can do better, and I should do better myself as I'm challenging all of us. So expand eviction preventions, legal assistance, that's really just to prevent from continuing to increase the housing needs because folks are super vulnerable in this moment in time. My colleague here, Jose, is going to be talking about this slide.
Good morning, I'm Jose Lopez. I'm the director for the San Diego office of ACE, the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment. And in order to solve this housing crisis, we need to focus on the 3 Ps. So it's not just about production, we also have to have a strong emphasis on preservation and protections. Although we all agree that we do need to build more housing, we're not gonna build our way out of this crisis. And when it comes to the protections that we think are the most important are protections against rent increases and unjust evictions. The current statewide protections are not enough. Currently, with the rent being capped at 8.8, the rent increases being capped at 8.8%, and rents averaging around $3,000 a month for a 2-bedroom, that's around the $265 rent increase. That's an additional $3,100 that a renter will pay the next year. Besides lowering the rent cap, we also need to make sure we strengthen our local just cause eviction protections by closing the loopholes for no-fault evictions, specifically those for remodeling. Every time that tenants are evicted for remodeling, we lose naturally affordable housing, and renters are thrown out into an incredibly unaffordable market. We've seen buildings from 8 units to over 60 units all get evicted by one landlord in order to make repairs. And we also need to make sure that we are protecting people against Ellis Act evictions, which is when a landlord decides to pull their property off the rental market. Because if we only ban the remodeling evictions, then landlords are going to go ahead and just evict people using the Ellis Act. In order to access the Ellis Act protections, you do need rent control. So that is another reason why it's important for us to have a local rent stabilization ordinance. And I'll pass it back to Georgette.
So the other piece that it's actually not innovative, because community land trusts have been around for many, many, many years. But we had an opportunity to partner with the county through the Innovative Fund to do a community land trust in San Isidro. And I want to take a second to share that, because that is a brand new project that will deliver 103 units for the 30% to 60% AMI income earners. That will be a rent to own. And it was done under a project labor agreement. So I say that because sometimes we use certain data that we can't do it, or the challenges. Was it challenging? Yes, but we're able to deliver it, and it's gonna impact a pretty low vulnerable community that will eventually have an opportunity to own, which is pretty significant. We're not talking about medium income, the middle income, we're talking about the low income earners that are gonna be able to be homeowners. And the pre-development was supported by the county and the state through the Innovative Housing Fund. So we have an opportunity to create and not only provide money, but also you have land that could be under a community land trust. We have an opportunity to do more beyond the land that is under private ownership. So I encourage you to really look at that and be able to be more creative through that lens. As Jose talked about,
I'm going to go ahead and pause your time. Unfortunately, you're well over your 4 minutes.
Oh.
Yeah. So you have 2 minutes and 28 seconds left for your final speaker to speak.
Yeah, she needs 1 minute, so we're good.
Okay.
So we're good.
For the board's rules, each speaker cannot exceed 4 minutes.
Oh, got it. Okay, thanks for that clarity.
Thank you so much.
All right, no problem.
Okay. All right, I'll pick up where you left off. Okay, Ginger Hitzke Development, for-profit developer. Very, very proud to be here today with ACE and with Georgette from CASA. Okay, I agree. We need to preserve naturally occurring mobile home parks. I didn't even read this presentation. I'm sorry, girl. That's okay. Okay. but we have got to protect renters. Let me just tell you, I make my living from collecting rents from individuals, both businesses and individual renters as their residents. You can protect renters and not have your properties fall apart, and you can make a living. It's okay. So I just really strongly encourage the county to think about what they can do beyond existing state law. And please feel free to talk to people who own 500 units of housing and thousands of square foot of commercial and can still do right by residents. For profit, I'm not nonprofit. I'm gonna just say my thing really quick. I wrote a letter, has 4 points, to our policy, to our money. 1, update your definition of affordable to 150%. Nothing stops you. Those are the people who need affordable homes to buy. They're the only ones that can actually afford it. Update it to update to 150% AMI. Create an ordinance to make affordable subdivisions ministerial. So pair them together. Work with CLTs, because they're the ones that can manage the restriction, the resale restriction. The 2 funding ones, align your NOFA language so that projects like the one Georgette and I are working on, 103 units of affordable rental between 30% and 60% of median income. The federal government has no problem with us converting it to homeownership at the end of the 15 years. Guess who does? Local government. Okay, the state even allows us to remove that restriction. And then just update your NOFA language to provide pre-development and land acquisition funding. And I wrote a long thing about it. I believe in personal guarantees, and that's something the county doesn't do. And it's the one thing you guys can hold people accountable for when they borrow your money. And that's it. Can I turn it back over to Georgia? No, we're good. Okay. We're good.
I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. All right, that concludes our group presentation. So now we will go to our individual speakers in person. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. We had really dense and thoughtful group presentations. So before we go to our individual speakers, I did just want to give my colleagues an opportunity if they have any questions from any of the group speakers. And I just want to say thank you. The incredibly constructive and thoughtful specific recommendations that I hope we can really dig into. And I have a couple questions, but if any of my colleagues do, I didn't want to lose the great work that people put into this. Supervisor Geary? Oh, apologies. Supervisor Anderson, you were first. She was just so eager.
One of the points that was brought up was when we're looking at zoning, we like to do it in packages. And sometimes because we do it in a package, it's delayed 2 or 3 years. City of San Diego, I believe, does it annually. And I'm wondering if we could switch to that model and take smaller bites that are more timely than bigger bites that aren't timely. And maybe we could remove that one barrier. Is that something that I need to write a board letter for, or is that some direction that we can give from the dais?
Thank you, Supervisor Anderson. Through the chair, that is direction you all can provide through the dais. At the dais, do want to turn over to my team at PDS to talk about what we are doing from some of the feedback we have received, from the board members, from the public on that topic. In some cases, it does take longer because we have a big, substantial environmental effort that needs to occur. But in other cases, we can do these cleanups and smaller efforts on an annual basis to prevent, to your point, the larger effort. So I'm going to turn to Vince Nicoletti to speak to that.
Thanks, Davia. So yes, we do regular zoning updates. We have one actually coming this winter that is a cleanup touching things on wineries, healthcare trailers, community events. In terms of the reference from the BIA and others on changes to align general plan and zoning, we are following the approach that was just discussed of a phased annual one. We have our first one that will be coming next winter, roughly February of 2027. So it's going to be next winter. We're working on it now. And then we'll have another one about a year later following up on that. So we do have those going in phases in the future.
Excellent. Thank you.
Supervisor Geary.
I want to echo what Supervisor Anderson said. We're in a housing crisis. So I would love to see this be, and I understand, staff capacity and all of that, but I would like to see the regularity of that happen. My question had to do with one of the commenters regarding transitioning affordable housing units to ownership. She mentioned local jurisdictions. Do you know where the crux of that challenge is?
Good morning, Supervisor, and through the chair. So the starting point for evaluating community land trust, all the various models that exist across the state, really starts with the financial feasibility of it, short, medium, and long-term, location, all the variables that go into development of any particular site. In the case of the county, we were able to make money available on a pre-development loan because the project demonstrated that it was viable in the short, medium, and long-term. It had a plan on how it would convert at the 15-year cycle. So I can't speak for other jurisdictions, but the county's approach is very much based on financial viability, effectiveness, being able to administer and develop a development through the construction phase all the way through operations and then into the long-term maintaining it viable.
Is there an opportunity to make that more efficient and streamline it?
For our most flexible tool that we have is the Innovative Housing Trust Fund. Right now, all of the money is exhausted in that particular fund. We have allocated it across the region. So very flexible tools such as the Innovative Housing Trust Fund allow us to make investments in different types of opportunities. And the beauty of the way the fund is set up and maybe other interventions that are coming from these discussions is as we build a suite of tools, interventions that we can use in different locations, different models that maybe are coming into the region or being explored, the county will be able to make investments. So the wonderful thing about the partnership that's being discussed here and really setting the stage into the future is evaluating new models, having flexible forms of funding or availability of land so that they can be invested. And being ready for those new opportunities.
Great, thank you.
Supervisor Montgomery Steppe.
Thank you so much. Yes, so with regard to the zoning ordinance updates, this is something that I've been meeting with Luge on for the last 6 months at least, because what I've been hearing from industry and community is that there are a lot of inconsistencies, right, when we go through the process. And that leaves a lot of the decision-making to be fairly discretionary, which costs time, right? And so it is, I'm glad we're talking about it and doing it and moving forward, but I do feel like February 2027 is a long way out. There's sort of one thing to add updates and amendments based off of our direction, but there's just state law that comes down every year. And I want to make sure that we're just completely in line with all of what we're discussing here, our sustainable land use framework, the general plan, everything, and state law, and to make sure that those updates reflect all of the changing and evolving rules and regulations that we have to deal with wherever we do have land use jurisdiction. And that's really just what, from an implementation standpoint, which I think we've heard through all three of the presentations, really, I think that's one of the most important things that we can do, and I think it should be prioritized as such. So February 2027 seems a bit far out from that, but feel free to respond to that.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Through the chair, we will absolutely go back and look at our timeline. The February of 2027 I was referring to was the first phase of our aligning general plan and zoning discrepancies. We do still have multiple other zoning updates coming between now and then. I referenced one coming this winter that talks about wineries, healthcare trailers, community events. We have another one coming this winter on accessory dwelling units and housing, where we will be codifying many of the state laws that have gone into effect that you may have been referencing, where the laws are changing. We have to update them in our zoning ordinance, as well as it'll include a proposal for the private sale of ADUs as well. But we will look at our cadre of zoning ordinance updates going forward over the next year and look at where we can include other changes into any of them moving forward.
Yes, thank you for that, because for the next year, those discrepancies between the general plan and the zoning ordinance are something that folks have to deal with as they're going through the process. And so that's really, and that they've been dealing with, and they have to continue to deal with that. So would love to just see an update from that plan moving forward as far as the timing is concerned.
Vice Chair, through the chair, if I may, one of the things that we're balancing with that type of priority, and we certainly hear it from you all as well as our stakeholders, is the vast suite of housing efforts, including focusing on our housing element and ensuring that we are compliant with the state there, and I know we hear that from our stakeholders as well, is really balancing all of those efforts, moving efficiently, as well as balancing the dollar monetary resources that we have to make sure that we are moving as quickly as we can, and we want to move faster.
Yes.
We hear you, and you're absolutely right. As well as completing so many of these efforts and adding on all of these new innovative ideas. So as we continue to have these conversations on housing, we'd certainly look to the board for your support and guidance on priorities, timing, resourcing, particularly in this environment. Thank you.
And on that note, we'll have another discussion after our public comment, but just on that note, the zoning ordinance updates and the consistency, I think for me is going to be priority number one. And the reason why I think it's just foundational to everything else that we're doing. It's hard to add the new things when the foundation and consistency is not there for folks to be able to have some sort of predictability with the laws that are already in existence that just need consistency in our process. So that would be priority one for me. It's very mundane for you all. It's a super heavy lift. But I think if we can get that right, then we can be on the track to be able to improve our implementation and operational processes. I really do believe that. But we do have some amazing things that you all are doing. Removing barriers to housing, pro-housing designation, the plan self-certification. These are all awesome things. And foundationally, though, we have to have that consistency with our zoning code and the general plan and state law and all the things. Thank you.
I just want to uplift, I think there's I'm hearing a lot of consistency across the board on the zoning issue being a high priority, so I just wanted to uplift. We've now heard that from three out of three supervisors who've spoken have identified zoning consistency as a priority. I don't want to take too much time, but I really was very interested in the extremely detailed slide that the BIA team, I think it was Sean, had. If we could see that again. It's like the very specific recommendations, immediate, midterm, and long-term things we could do. I thought it was extremely helpful. So I think we've talked about the zoning. Seems like a lot of consistency on that. I think my question was number 4. What does that mean? Expand removing barriers to housing all village areas.
I believe, through the chair, Sean, I believe what you're referring to is the guaranteed review times under the removing barriers. So when we deployed the removing barriers to housing 2 years ago, we offered guaranteed review times for a couple of project types in geographic areas. One is a 100% affordable housing project. So if someone has a 100% affordable housing project, as one presentation noted, we are legally not able to make those subdivisions ministerial. They are discretionary, but we offer a guaranteed review time for those reviews. Similarly, under the removing barriers to housing, we offered guaranteed review times for projects in VMT efficient and infill areas, as well as workforce housing. And I'm going to interpret, Sean, the request here is to expand that offer of guaranteed review times to villages as well. I'm seeing a nod.
Okay. So super well. And then what about land use overlay? That one.
Through the chair. So the concept here is the DFA did a financial analysis, and while we have some qualms with some of the numbers that came out of it, we largely support the findings, which is that in the unincorporated communities, rents don't justify product types at higher densities because those higher density product types tend to be more expensive. And so that's why we're not seeing the R24s and R30 projects moving forward in the village areas, as well as some other reasons. The product type that is developable is townhomes, small lot detached courtyards. So that's what we're trying to build today. That's a more affordable, attainable, lowercase a. The challenge that we have is the the zoning ordinance is a real struggle for us at even those moderate densities, and so we would need to take advantage of state density bonus law in order to use waivers and concessions to build those more moderate densities. The challenge is that under density bonus, we have to use a base density that is artificially high, because if a property is zoned for more units than we can build, in order to qualify for density bonus, we have to provide so much percentage of those base units as affordable. So if we have an R30 site that's 5 acres, for density bonus purposes, our base density is 150 units, 5 acres, 30 units per acre. But if the market is only 15 units, or 15 units per acre, like a townhome, we want to build 75 units. But in order to build 75 units, we need density bonus waivers and concessions in order to build that product typology. And so in order to qualify for that, we would have to build, if it's very low income, 10% of our base units or 15% of the units as deed restricted low income. But those will count against our 75 units that we want to build. So our actual market rate unit number goes down to 60 base units, goes down to 60 units. So we end up in a scenario where that becomes economically infeasible because we're over providing the amount of affordable housing based on an artificially high base density. It's not that we don't want to use it. We would still have to build 10% of 75 units as affordable to qualify for density bonus or to meet an inclusionary ordinance, but it's not artificially high based on unrealistic land uses.
And how does the land use, I mean, isn't that a zoning issue, not a land, how would the land use
So it's
overlay
gotta be-
address that instead of a zoning?
Yeah, so it has to be land use, because under density bonus, we have to go to our base density, and the density is allocated based on your land use designation, not your zoning. If we did a zoning overlay, our base land use would still be some artificially high, not artificially high, but some infeasible land use today. What the overlay does is over time, and we agree with EHL on this, over time the villages will have the kinds of uses that will then support the ability to build higher density units, and you won't have to do a GPA now and then come back with a GPA in the future. You would either build under the overlay or you would build under the general plan. The reason we see this as feasible in 12 months is because you're not increasing density under this proposal. You're actually moderating density to achieve today's market while also providing for future growth in the areas where the general plan dictates future growth to happen.
Okay, thank you so much. That was complicated, but thank you. I think I maybe got, I understood enough to say I completely agree with my colleagues on the zoning piece being a high priority, and it seems like we better take into account the land use overlay alongside the zoning ordinance update together. That's about what I think I could take away from that very complicated presentation. Thank you very much, Sean. Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question kind of back to what we were talking before about the 58,000 units that are available now. Do we know, are all of those buildable or 80%? I don't need an exact number, but is that really, how many of those are feasible? And if they're out in the middle of nowhere, the likelihood of them even being built or developed, it sounds like, oh, we got a ton of housing units and nobody's building them. What's the reality?
Supervisor, through the chair, some of those are not feasible due to their location, due to the lack of needed infrastructure, as well as just market demand not being there. Also, with these units, this is looking at capacity, and at the general plan level, we looked at some constraints as well, like slopes and environmental sensitive areas. But each one of these sites would need their own individual site-specific analysis to determine what could be built, what kind of project, what kind of yield. So it's not an exact number that could be provided. This all is subject to case-by-case analysis for each one of these parcels moving forward.
I guess, well, because you say you got like 4,000 units in the pipeline that hopefully are under the general plan currently. That's less than 10% of the number of housing, I guess, lots available. It just seems we've got to be able to, increase that number to get developers to want to build. And I'm hearing a lot about the infill in the village areas, which is great. But one of the things that scares me a little bit is, the apartment. And Ginger, no offense, but I'd like to see is that if we're building products that people can buy, not just rent, because then they can get that generational wealth. They can get that equity as opposed to the apartment owner. But I know we got to have a mix. But what I see, and I see what's being built a lot, are more and more apartments. But we also need we need townhomes and condos and things like that are also people can afford to buy and create that generational wealth so they can have that and move forward with that. So appreciate the input.
Okay, seeing no further comments, we're going to move to public comment. How many speakers do we have?
We still have 21 speakers. We have 11 in person and 10 speaking by phone.
Okay, so just a reminder that this is set to end at noon. So we'll do our speakers and then we'll have time for, about half an hour or more or less of board discussion.
Wonderful.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Lawson-Remer. So we will go ahead and begin with our in-person speakers. As your name is called, if you could please come forward and stand on the arrows until it is your turn to speak at the podium. Since we do have 10 or more speakers, you will have 1 minute to address the board. If you could please begin by stating your name for the audio record, and I'll be calling individuals in groups at 3, so please listen for your name. I'd like to invite forward the first 3 individuals: Alicia Morrison, Robert Gurman, and Doyle Morrison.
Good morning. Today I'm speaking as a private citizen, but my hope is to have a community role as one of the 5 members of the community, Lincoln Acres Community Sponsor Group. As stated in the county's 2011 general plan, it is important to understand community plans play a critical role in general plan implementation. They provide an opportunity to further refine and apply general plan policies at a smaller geographic scale. So when local jurisdictions are making efforts to address the need for housing, those efforts need to align with the community's plan. I understand this item is for decisions in the 2026-27 period, and the key takeaways from the development feasibility analysis is informative. I would like to provide additional input that with higher and greater density in communities, greater problems and expenses come along with it, such as increase in crime, budgeting for municipalities, and safety. Thank you.
Thank you. And could you please state your name for the record?
Alicia Morrison.
Thank you so much.
Doyle Morrison from Lincoln Acres. Good morning, supervisors and staff. In discussing housing and land use policies in the unincorporated county development feasibility analysis finding and related CEQA exemptions, I would like to express how VMT and CEQA exemptions almost affected Lincoln Acres residents while disregarding the County of San Diego and the City of National City's general plan. A project was championed by the National City planning staff without coordinating with the county, even notifying the Lower Sweetwater Fire Protection District of a boundary change. As a matter of fact, a traffic report was submitted and it disregarded Orange Street, even though the county had it designated as my community's evacuation route. Had this project moved forward, it would have congested Orange Street and Sweetwater Road, made it a daily nightmare to commute on our street, and caused a serious safety concern in the event of emergency evacuation. All infill developments have the potential to do more harm than good. When you do make decisions to take action, please remember that balance is vital in preventing more problems than we aim to solve. Thank you.
Thank you. As Robert's coming forward, I'll call the next 3 speakers: Lucy Terry, Joe Hood, and Cesar Javier.
Sorry.
Robert Gervin. San Diego County Regional Airport Authority is the only airport authority in the state that is in complete control of land use around the 16 airports of San Diego County. These airports impact land use, sustainability, and generate greenhouse gases. It is an industry that is exempt from the Clean Air Act and the storage and uses of leaded fuel. The authority is responsible for land use around our airports. These airports have 3-mile influence area, as the slides depict, and I'm just going to scroll just so you get an idea. Miramar Airport is 4 miles from the coast. Montgomery is 3 miles. Those airports overlap one another. That is a continuous airport influence area of 7 miles. Montgomery is 9 miles from Gillespie. Gillespie is 15 miles from Ramona. Take 3 miles away from each airport, and you're left with 9 miles of non-aviated influence from the coast to the mountains. Alpine has been designated by the Airport Authority and rubber stamped by the FAA for flight training for all of San Diego. The majority of this aviation influence is in the unincorporated. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Next speaker.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Lucy Terry, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club San Diego today, alongside some of my colleagues, as we review today's analysis and preview to major land use items coming over the next 2 years, including fire risk, VMT mitigation program, and the sustainable land use framework. I want to ground this discussion in the intersecting realities this county is facing. We are not only in a housing crisis and a cost of living crisis that is exacerbated by climate change. Extreme heat, flooding, bad air quality days, insurance withdrawals, and repeated emergency responses are all contributing to rising household, infrastructure costs, and strains on local government. Where and how we pursue housing projects in this county determines whether those pressures get better or worse. That's why this board adopted the fire safe and VMT efficient smart growth alternative in September 24. This is the primary adopted smart growth policy framework the county has to accomplish emissions reductions as outlined in the Climate Action Plan. Findings from today will help clarify the constraints that impact communities across the county, but they cannot replace the policy direction this board has already established. Findings should be interpreted through, not instead of, the smart growth alternative. Thank you for your time.
My name is Joe Hood, representing the Sierra Club San Diego Climate Committee. We are here today to remind the board that on September 11th, 24, this body adopted a county's climate action plan, including fire safe and vehicle mile traveled efficient smart growth alternative. That decision was not symbolic. It was a commitment. Smart growth alternative was chosen precisely because it aligns with the county's climate, housing, and public safety goals. It directs growth toward areas that are already served by infrastructure, reduce wildfire risk, and minimize long-distance vehicle travel. Consider our climate crisis. Earth is moving past habitability. We passed the tipping point for corals. We're beyond 1.5 and even 2 degrees. San Diegans have made it clear we want a future that is climate resilient, equitable, and safe.
Thank you. And as our next speakers coming forward, I'd like to invite the next 3 speakers, Jim Whalen, Dorothea Flanagan, and Ana Ramos.
Cesar and Purita, University of Life. Fraught with lesson. Let's go. Let's do the job. We see only upper house, lower house, and no house at all, the homeless. Rural urban planning ought to consider shelter for man. What is a home or house when no one is there? Sick, dying, and dead. Look at those housing at the Tijuana River Valley pollution. What is a house when there is no clean water? 450 milligrams of chlorine per gallon. Are you telling us, to the public, how much chemical do you put in the water we drink? What is a home when someone cannot reach you?
Thank you, sir. That's your time.
Many more. Thank you. What is a house without time?
You can come forward in any order. Thank you.
I'm Dorothea Flanagan, eyes and hands on the ground for North County, so I see everything. What we've got going on is these developers think they're above the law, and when I call code enforcement on them, their compliance is spotty about 20% of the time. Please develop a policy that applies to them. I had to call the sheriff, educate them too, putting up the Havens, putting up 2 signs on every speed limit post, which is illegal, blighting 5 major streets to lead to their project. If housing is so desperately needed, why would they need to blight East Vista Way, Champaign Boulevard, Route 76, Gopher Canyon? Enforce the code on them. They put out 60 signs every weekend. I had to embarrass them on nextdoor.com, so they went and took them down.
Good morning, supervisors. My name is Ana Ramos. I'm a community organizer with ACE, and for the past few months, we've been organizing in the San Isidro community to establish our first official ACE chapter, made up of community leaders and neighbors advocating for improvements in their neighborhood. And in the process of building this chapter, one of the main concerns is obviously housing. The cost of housing is extremely unaffordable, and our members, they can't wait for the housing market to go down or for housing developments to catch up to the housing demands. People need immediate measures like rent control, or where we can put stricter limits on annual rent increases, or acquiring more housing for community land trusts that are specifically designed to keep that cost of housing low. I think we all know that people who are rent burdened spend more than 30% of their income on housing, and unfortunately that's the majority of our members. So we need to prioritize creative solutions that address people's immediate needs. Thank you.
And I'll call the final 2 in-person speakers, Arnell Andres and Stephen Russell.
Good morning, Chair Reamer and members of the Board of Supervisors. Jim Whalen, J. Whalen Associates, happy to be here. It was a bracing discussion, very constructive. I'm not going to talk about any of the big picture things because everybody covered them really well. I will say that in 1998, when we started the general plan update, Dan Silver and I are the only ones left. Everybody else, muerto. 5 recommendations. First, the villages are obviously the way to go. The county did a lot on transfer of development rights in the Alpine community, and I would suggest you finish that because it's a way to deal with property owners who have semi-rural and rural designations around the villages. It's a way to preserve their land value and build support. Second thing is a personal bug for me is electric cars were never allowed by SB 743 as mitigation for VMT. They should be. That's how people get around in the villages. We don't have transit out there. The third thing, the process is rough. One thing we do is we indemnify, and you should allow us to take the risk. And the last 2, waivers and incentives are more important than the number of units. Think about that. The waivers and incentives are more important than the number of units. Bye.
Appreciate it. Next speaker.
Hi, Arnell Andres, and good morning to all supervisors and staff. I'm a member of the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, the National City Chapter. But I live in San Diego, District 4 actually, where the west side street is National City, the east side street is San Diego. But my heart is in National City. So currently I'm working with my group to fight rent increases, tenant harassments, and unjust evictions. We're working to pass rent control, stronger tenant protections, as well as protecting our right to organize as we form tenant associations and tenant unions. I hope that San Diego adopts and champions this way of dealing with the housing crisis and lead the way. And if you do find success on that path, please feel free to reach out to and encourage my council members, especially my mayor, who just last night received the Turkey of the Year award for his lack of dedication for 33 years to help solve these issues. If I can't get housing in National City, I hope to move in the unincorporated areas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and Supervisors. Stephen Russell with the San Diego Housing Federation. Very much appreciate this workshop on housing in the county today and have a few comments for you. First of all, we know that we cannot fulfill arena needs with single-family homes. It would require 4 or 5 Mira Mesas to meet our housing needs with single-family homes. So density, townhomes, row homes, all of the forms are obviously very essential. Housing needs to be near schools and jobs. We know that building in high opportunity areas is critical for all kinds of housing. We need the Innovative Housing Trust Fund to be a regular source. It is hit or miss based on what each year's allocation is. It needs to be something folks can rely on to build a pipeline of housing in this area for affordable housing. We're able to leverage that money very well. Inclusionary housing absolutely is a critical tool. In lieu fees, while maybe not preferred by all, are a necessary thing by state law to make sure that there are alternate means of compliance. And we have been able to leverage those in lieu fees at the city into our own trust fund and to leverage them for even more housing. By right development is absolutely critical if we're going to succeed. And again, I want to thank you all for having a workshop on the subject today.
Thank you. We will now hear from those that have requested to speak by phone. Again, when it's your turn to speak, you'll be unmuted. You will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments, and we will go ahead and begin with our first caller.
All about the main focus needs to be on safety and adequate background noise and so on. There needs to be more than 5 or 10% of truly low-income housing, not just what the big developers want. Good luck with building 58,000 units without considering topography. Cliff dwellings, you should build 3D printed shipping crate, maybe adobe houses. These would not only be quicker and cheaper, but also keep up with the market for new homes better instead of houses that might not be built for years. Then you'd be less likely to end up with an oversupply of homes. 5G or higher frequency facilities near schools or housing are dangerous. Kids especially are sensitive. You need rigorous testing before approving these. Big.
Thank you. Your time is up. We'll go to our next speaker.
Okay, so the housing, Consuelo here. So the housing crisis will never be solved as long as the greed crisis is alive and well. Homelessness, rent spikes, families pushed out. This is not a mystery. It's the result of policies that protect developers, corporate buyers, and UN-aligned planning, not residents. Stop pretending otherwise. And now you're pushing VMT fees. Call it what it is, a penalty, a restriction, a tool of control, not sustainability, surveillance and behavioral enforcement wrapped in pretty words like equity and safety. This is UN agenda governance, plain and simple. Stop lying about sustainability, stop lying about caring, and stop lying about helping while making life smaller, harder, and more controlled for the people who live here. And if the students are still in the building, listen closely. All of you, listen. You're being conditioned to believe it's normal for government to.
Thank you. Your time is up. We'll go ahead and go to our next speaker.
Good morning. My name is Becky Raff, and as you weigh proposals suggesting that the backcountry needs rezoning for rezoning land for housing, I urge you to consider what we've already learned from past land use pressures, including the attempted expansion of marijuana operations into these same rural areas. In both cases, the pattern is clear. Pushing high-impact uses into the backcountry does not benefit residents, and it places real strain on the environment and limited infrastructure. Our backcountry has long been protected for its ecological value, wildlife risk, rural character, and the safety of the people who live there. Once we rezone these areas, we open the door to development that conflicts with those core values and introduces pressures from traffic to fire danger to habitat loss that these communities were never designed to absorb. Just as expanding marijuana grows in the backcountry is the wrong direction. Expanding housing.
Thank you. Your time is up. We'll go to our next caller.
It's truth. Joel and Monica took a $22,000 taxpayer-funded trip to Vienna, Austria to social stack and pack the backcountry. The state went from level of service to vehicle miles traveled as the new goalpost to rig the game to fit the United Nations agenda of no housing in rural areas. The VMT cost is added into every single family home development. Is it any wonder why housing in California is unaffordable? Politicians keep whining about a lack of supply of affordable housing. So why do they keep putting more fees on single-family homes to stop their development? These policies have been exacerbating housing costs and forcing people to mass exodus. You're going to have nobody left to tax because building more box units only gentrifies neighborhoods, displacing the originals to be replaced with idiots from LA who think $1 million fixer-upper is a great buy. I don't expect people who own multiple homes like Tara, Manuela, and Joel to understand what the middle class is actually going through. Consider yourselves privileged and ignorant, and you do nothing but benefit the corporate developers. That's what you're going to continue to do like you've always done.
Thank you. We'll go to our next caller.
Talk about a housing racket. You guys are wondering why there isn't housing? Because we literally pay you to impede the housing to be produced. Every time you guys sit and you change your policies, your regulations, your zoning, it's on a continual basis. And then you sit here and say that because you permitted homes, you're building them. That's not happening. You guys are incompetent. And it's so sad because if you do put something into play, you put people in danger because you're putting them in high fire zones with no evacuation route. And you care more about the planet and saving that, which you are not doing in any manner or fashion, but you spend a lot of money on it. If you spent as much time and consideration on the people and you really wanted to provide them housing, you would do that, because everything that you do trying to save the planet literally impedes your ability to provide the homes for the people that you care about. Maybe you guys should give up one of your homes that you actually have and quit putting people in danger and sacrificing their lives just to save the planet, or put them in a fire zone without any type of mitigation.
Thank you. Your time is up, and we'll go to our next caller.
Good morning, Chair Lawson-Remer and Supervisors. My name is Evan Strawn. I'm speaking on behalf of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce, whose mission is to make the San Diego region the best place to live and work. I want to start by thanking you for holding this housing workshop to dive into housing production in the county, as well as the barriers to more housing being built. One of the greatest challenges facing our member businesses is a lack of available and affordable housing so they can attract and retain employees. Unfortunately, housing production in the unincorporated area has not kept pace with demand, and burdensome regulations often make development infeasible. We encourage the county to support the recommendations of the Building Industry Association, including those in response to development feasibility analysis findings. We also caution the county against imposing additional regulations that can unintentionally add costs or time for construction. Smart planning and a sensible BMT policy can deliver real housing results for our region, and we look forward to supporting those solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chair Lawson, we're not seeing any more callers called in. That concludes public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll begin with Vice Chair Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you, Chair Lawson-Remer, and thank you, everyone, for all of your participation in one way or another, whether it was in this hearing or along the way. This DFA being, years in the making. I've said quite a bit of what my thoughts were, but I want to bring in a couple of additional thoughts and then questions for KMA. I don't know if representatives are here. Hello. I wanted to ask about the building types, the building housing types that are listed in the analysis, and whether or not there's any discussion around what we heard from some of the community presentations around community land trusts, co-ops, anything outside of sort of our general and kind of older style of housing, any new and innovative, or maybe innovative to us and not innovative generally, but that building types that we don't normally do.
Well, good morning, Supervisors. This is Rena Arvizu with Kaiser Marston. We did not evaluate older typologies. We evaluated generally the typologies that we see within the region. So if you look at our financial analyses, we tested typologies that were allowed under existing general plan land use designations. Generally, they did not exceed 30 units per acre. They consisted of single-family detached homes, large lot, small lot, rental garden apartments, rental stack flat apartments with structured parking, and in some cases, we evaluated mixed-use development where appropriate. In the case of Casa de Oro, we did note that there's an adopted specific plan, and so we did increase densities up to 40 units to the acre, which was allowed, and in a mixed-use format as well. When we looked at Spring Valley, there were sites that were designated as just commercial only, and so there we decided to test typologies up to 30 units to the acre, as well as within a mixed-use configuration. However, that said, we feel that all the typologies that we tested are within just the range of what we see as developable typologies within the region.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that at some point, and I don't know how to do this or what structure we would need to use as a county, but we have to look beyond what we're doing. I mean, we're here now because of what we have been doing, right? And I know that you all had a framework that you were assigned to stay within, understand and appreciate that, but there are quite a few housing types throughout our nation and internationally that may, we may be able to fit into our structure or provide a way. We are, after all, the policymakers, right? So I think that we certainly have to start looking outside of what is before us, because we should have a sort of all hands on deck opportunity to test out, I think, certain building types in particular that may actually work for us. I also just want to bring in transportation into the conversation as well, especially looking at the village models. And thank you for answering the question. I think that Supervisor Anderson may talk about this, but it is quite true that in many of these areas, there's just no public transportation. And when we are trying to meet our goals and we're talking about VMT standards, we have to coordinate with SANDAG and in some cases, but not in all cases, in TS, to figure out what can be done in these areas to increase the public transportation or access to public transportation. There's also different ways to do that. There's bus rapid transit, that does not have to be a trolley coming through, but there are many different things I think we should be thinking about. Because it sounds like there's some sense or some sort of consensus around kind of exploring this village development again, which I think was the intent of the general plan back in 2011. And if we're going to do that, I think the fire evacuation analysis is extremely important, but also public transportation is very, very important there. So I want to put that out there. I know the SANDAG is working on a regional VMT program. Certainly would like to include updates on that with what we do in the future, but want to bring transportation into the conversation along with the different building types, because we have discussed the zoning updates, which is very important to me, obviously. And, I will just say again, in lieu fees, it's just tough for me. I would like to see, what we come up with. I'm assuming that will be a part of our discussion with the inclusionary zoning ordinance that we're going to see soon. But I have seen it just continue to separate communities, and so I don't want to support anything that's going to do that. But definitely open for the discussion. So thank you for all of your work. I'll keep it there. I know we'll continue to meet on these issues, but I do appreciate the work that has been put into this, and also appreciate all the presentations from our community members and the public comment. Thank you.
Supervisor Greer.
Thank you. Thank you again, staff, and to all the speakers who took the time to give your feedback. I have quite a few prepared remarks and suggestions. So I want to remind everybody that nearly half of our households in the county are renters, and rents have climbed more than 50% since 2018. Only 1 in 10 county residents can afford a median price home, now approaching $1 million. And more than 80% of extremely low-income households are spending over half of their income just to stay housed. So without us taking action, too many will join the nearly 10,000 people that are already in a situation of homelessness. That's what we're up against right now. So I think that we need to start thinking outside of the box. I align myself with what the Vice Chair said. We can't keep repeating the same thing over and over. We have to find a path forward that is forward-thinking. Our housing blueprint gives us a clear direction rooted in the 5 Ps: produce more homes, promote equity, preserve what we have, prevent displacement, and protect tenants. We've made progress, but today's conversation showed where we need to push harder, particularly on preservation, displacement, and protections for renters who make up almost half our region. On production, I think we need to be honest about the reality we're working with. The 2011 General Plan established a vision for village-focused, climate-aligned growth. State VMT rules now sharpen that focus, concentrating new housing in the places where it reduces driving, strengthens climate commitments, and connects people to opportunity. Fighting these rules won't move us forward, but using them wisely will. The DFA makes it clear, without innovation, large-scale growth in the unincorporated areas will remain limited. That's why moving quickly on the Housing Unlocked zoning updates and climate action plan aligned sustainable land use framework is essential. It lowers costs, removes unnecessary barriers, and helps builders create the homes we need in the right places. And if we structure VMT mitigation as a tool for smart growth regionally, we can direct those dollars towards infill housing, close financial gaps on projects near jobs and transit, which I agree we could have talked a little bit more about that, and reward development that cuts emissions. Housing is a regional issue. It is not only an unincorporated area one. As my first piece of feedback, I would like to recommend that we collaborate closely with cities across the region so we can promote infill, transit-oriented, smart growth aligned with state law and our climate commitments. As was mentioned by one of the speakers earlier, we have approximately population of 70,000 commuters that go back and forth daily from San Diego to Tijuana. And something that they didn't mention that I will, in addition to my district being the most impacted by car emissions because of the cross-border, the busiest cross-border in the world, it is also, unfortunately and indirectly, contributing to our sewage crisis. Because as development projects continue to grow in Tijuana, because we're pushing so many people to live in Tijuana because they can't afford to live here, the sewage infrastructure does not continue to develop in Tijuana. And my district is literally suffering the negative externalities of that. So that's why it's so important for us to think outside of the box. Obviously, promoting equity and inclusion is equally critical. We have a responsibility to ensure people living at the margins are not permanently shut out. With updated feasibility data in hand, it's time to advance a strong inclusionary housing ordinance, one that ensures new development includes homes that are affordable to families across all income levels. 11 of the 18 jurisdictions in our region already have some form of inclusionary requirement. A county standard would close the gaps and provide consistency. So as a second piece of feedback, I would like to see this ordinance pass in 2026 without in lieu fees. As we grow, we also have to protect what we already have. Naturally occurring affordable housing, older apartments, small multifamily buildings, mobile home parks, which we haven't discussed either, are often lost faster than new restricted units are built. Preservation is the quiet cornerstone of this work, and costs are 2 to 3 times cheaper per unit than new construction. These homes are some of the last affordable options left, and they are disappearing faster through speculation and redevelopment. District 1 has shown what creative models can do. Community land trusts that secure affordability for generations. Lower income housing tax credit ownership pathways that pair development with long-term stability. We should turn these innovations into scalable, predictable tools. At the same time, the county is helping residents stay housed by lowering utility burdens, improving energy efficiency, and preparing neighborhoods for climate-driven risks. As another suggestion, I encourage us to double down on innovative strategies that preserve affordable housing units and develop pathways to streamlined efforts that unlock intergenerational wealth, just like we did in the project that we were talking about earlier, Mr. Estrella. A major subject we had limited discussion on today are efforts to prevent displacement before it even starts. Too many families live one crisis away from losing their home. Seniors on fixed incomes face some of the highest housing and healthcare costs in the country. We know that that's going to be exacerbated with all the work requirements to qualify for Medi-Cal, Medicaid that are coming out of the White House. Young people are working families often can't find a foothold near where they work or study. Programs like separate sale ADUs and the Senior and Starter Home Initiative show promise, but they can't carry this alone. Preventing homelessness means investing in rent relief, emergency assistance, legal support, and targeted outreach to those most at risk. And the project-based vouchers we approved last meeting will help modernize legacy public housing while opening opportunities to add more homes on those sites without displacing existing residents. But to do any of this well, we must organize ourselves around a simple truth. Housing is for everyone. Echoing the priority setting of our CAO, I urge us for closer coordination between our planning teams in the Land Use and Environment Group and our Affordability and Homeless Services teams in Housing and Community Development Services. We need to create a stronger bridge between the two. Not that there already isn't one. I just want to say that. Finally, we must talk about protecting renters, the 5th P, and one that didn't get the attention it deserves today. With nearly half the region renting, rising rents translate directly into overcrowding, evictions, long commutes, and displacement. Our recent pilot program supporting seniors paying more than half their income on rent was a vital step. The county's Office of Evaluation, Performance, and Analytics evaluation will show not just what this pilot cost, but what it saved, measured in stability, dignity, and the simple ability to stay housed. Before I wrap up my comments, I would also like to highlight the importance of workshops like the one we had today. I would like to see us have a more regular cadence of housing workshops, possibly once per year instead of biannually, to address housing holistically. So as we have learned from county staff and what I hope to have made clear, it's apparent that the solutions are in front of us. The data is clear, the need is urgent. I don't need to rehash that. We need to seize these opportunities. And I'll just close by saying that I would like to see the county develop a framework, a roadmap of how the county plays an integral role with all of our jurisdictions so that we can maximize housing in the right areas, not just in the unincorporated areas. And for that, we're going to have to be strong partners with our local jurisdictions, and we're going to have to put skin in the game one way or another. And that's why the Innovative Housing Trust Fund, as I mentioned in my swearing-in remarks, is so important. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you for those extremely eloquent remarks. I don't have a huge amount to add. I think I agree in spirit with everything my colleague has just said, much more eloquently than I was planning to. I just really wanted to focus on some practicalities because I know one of the hopes that we had coming out of this was some clarity on kind of like how to accelerate the work we all know we need to do on housing. So I just wanted to lift up in a really concrete, practical way both my priorities, but also trying to summarize what I'm hearing from my colleagues. So I think we all heard pretty loud and clear around the zoning piece, how to prioritize getting zoning rules in line with the plans for the villages. We already have a general plan. We're supposed to be building the villages. We're not. Zoning seems pretty foundational. I think that's what was pretty clear from Vice Chair Montgomery Stepp's remarks. So I just want to uplift that again, and I would agree with that. I think I would add to that, probably very helpful to at the same time think about this land use overlay piece, because those seem to go together. If we get the zoning right and not the land use, we're still not going to really be unlocking the potential that we think is nascent in the villages. So that's one piece, just very concretely, I wanted to lift up. Another piece I think came out in a lot of people's comments was around, okay, well, we have theoretically 58,000 units, but, you know, is it on a cliff? Is it like a place you can actually build? So I think there's probably some value in taking this development feasibility analysis that we've already undertaken around these 4 areas and really focusing on making that available to our developer community, because that's a tool. We've done that work. Now we know where it's feasible and where it's less feasible, and that's a big investment that developers then wouldn't have to be investing in, because we've done that groundwork. So that seems like a very concrete, low-hanging piece of fruit thing that we should do. I also wanted to identify the suggestion around mobile home parks. I thought that was really thoughtful. When we talk about preservation, sometimes it's hard to think about what do you do concretely, but the mobile home park issue is real. And I think it would be very helpful for us to look at what do we do to maintain affordability in mobile home parks that are in the county's jurisdiction, but also is there could we develop an ordinance that's not only applicable to the county, but could also then partner with some of our cities where they have more of the mobile home parks located that, we know people might be driven out, and that really should be naturally occurring affordable housing. And there's like real work we could do that's like a very low-hanging piece of fruit that I think we need to focus on. So that really popped for me, and I appreciated that in the presentations that seemed very pragmatic and immediate. And I hope we can move on that expeditiously. I also, wanted to uplift, I think both of my colleagues mentioned concerns about in-lieu fees around for inclusionary. I echo those. I think I'm fundamentally committed to like integrated communities, and we really need to be thinking about how we don't like reproduce redlining and segregation in sort of like new ways. And so I know you're going to come back with options, but just wanted to put on the table that I'm in alignment with my colleagues who mentioned those concerns, and I share them. So those felt like very specific and concrete things that we could do immediately. Areas that we did not, sorry, I have a couple other things. I also wanted to thank, is Dan Silver still here? Jim Whalen? Thank you both for being in for the long haul, for having been here 15 years ago and being here today, so 20. So thank you both. And, really thank you to everyone who's been part of this conversation. It's been a long, difficult, ongoing conversation. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here and for participating, and especially for you two and for those of you in general who've really continued to show up and continue to participate and seen a vision around the villages that sort of stalled and sputtered. And I think what I'm hearing today, if I can identify a consistent through line, is alignment sort of around the entire political spectrum represented here of like, hey, how do we focus on unlocking like what's already there in our general plan? So that I felt like that came out like across a lot of the presentations and a lot of the comments. So thank you all for that. And I also am interested in questions around better understanding, and this is not, I think this goes in the medium term, not the immediate, but the medium term, these questions around, do we need more innovative designs, like building designs, like what is creating, like how do we better address some of these barriers? And I think I put in that category are there construction options, community land trust options, but thinking a little bit more outside the box, because there's certainly like a limit to what we're going to be able to accomplish within the current paradigm. And I think the two concrete ideas that have surfaced that seem a little bit outside that current paradigm is the community land trust idea and like different ways of thinking about construction. But very interested in more ways of reimagining our paradigm entirely. But I would put those in the medium to long-term category because there's obviously immediate work we can do that we know we've got these villages and we're not building in them, and we can do a lot better with what we have. So trying to be really specific and concrete so that we can go in a straight line as quickly as possible moving forward, but those were some of my big takeaways. Does that make any sense? Is that helpful to the team? Anything didn't make sense? I often don't make sense.
No, Chair, that made perfect sense. We heard a lot. First of all, thank you everyone for your feedback today and the stakeholder comments. This workshop achieved exactly what we were hoping to. We heard some very key themes for prioritization, and we've taken diligent notes today. We do have a number of questions from some of the stakeholders today that we'd love to explore further. I certainly don't mean to overstep with if there are any other board comments. We will definitely follow up with the stakeholders today. We want to prioritize many of the items that were recommended. We have several questions about some of the ideas that came out so that we can further explore them. And then prioritization on things like the regular zoning ordinance updates, focusing on efficiencies in the villages, the land use overlay that was referenced, and many of the other items that you noted are all things that we will prioritize as we work forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Supervisor Desmond?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate, again, the presentation and the conversation that this is bringing up. We're in a housing crisis here in San Diego County, and, we spent several years studying these developable feasibility analysis, 4 different areas for potential housing units, trying to squeeze as many housing units as we can out of there. Out of those four potential sites, but however, we were squeezed to those primarily because, in my opinion, it's the VMT policy. It's so unfavorable in virtually all of the unincorporated area. I know transit was brought up. The Buena Creek area, which I represent, we've got is the one transit stop, the one rail transit stop, and we still need to tap more into that capability of housing in that area. And I think there's nothing wrong with trying to develop these DFAs, but I think it should be in addition to building out the villages in the general plan. I think hopefully you've heard that enough times today to be looking at those villages. But we got to make housing affordable to all. Not just particularly for the RENA numbers for the lower income, but also the middle income folks. This next generation, kids that get out of college and maybe they're making $150 grand a year, they can't afford a home. They can't afford a house. And we're squeezing them out and the next generation's leaving. So we've got, I don't know if there's any possibility, but it's $1 million to afford a home. Most people couldn't even afford the house that they're in if they're lucky enough to have a house. But I think we have to make that look at all income levels, so that we don't lose the next generation. And we talked about the 58,000 units that are available. Well, I think a lot of those projects are not coming forward primarily due to the VMT uncertainty and litigation. We just approved the Harmony Grove Village project. It was 5-0. Harmony, we voted on that one. However, the Sierra Club is now suing us over fire. And this is the second lawsuit that this development is going through. And we had all the fire experts. We had the law enforcement experts all here testifying in front of us. And yet we're being sued again. And that just raises the cost of the housing units over the long run. And the number, I think, is like 10 housing projects that came in the recent past, about 8,200 units. Just about every one of them got sued for something over CEQA. So and so it really kind of concerns how many of these how many people in developers are not even coming forward in fear of litigation right now, because that's a big uncertainty. Even the Harmony Grove project, which has been almost a decade in the planning, you know, when they put the project to pencil, it was a long time ago, and a lot of things have changed, and costs of lumber and it has gone up. So, you know, I think we also need to advocate for a change in CEQA that makes it more difficult to challenge a housing projects, unless there's truly a significant impact. We've got a lot of environmental groups in the counties that sue over just about anything, and I think are abusing the legal process. There should be a penalty for parties who submit frivolous lawsuits on housing projects, especially when they're consistent. If they're consistent with the general plan, they've mitigated their impacts, the experts have all testified on different areas, and yet we still seem to get sued, rising the cost. So, you know, just kind of sum it up, some of the things I'd like to see is, you know, make the processing and review times faster. And I know it's easy to say that, but we always hear about streamlining. We want to streamline this, we got to make the processing and review times faster and allow more licensed self-certification. VMT, I think, should be thrown completely out the window, or at least we go back to the unincorporated average. Yes, we've got 58,000 available lots, but how many of them are really buildable? And we actually were in the unincorporated, or had the unincorporated model at first. Unfortunately, that got changed back to the regional, and we lost a lot of other potential sites. So I think if we went back to the unincorporated methodology, we'd open up a lot more potential in the unincorporated areas. Also, I think absolutely, I mentioned building the villages, supporting CEQA change, and then thank you, but work with the BIA. If we can, you know, they came up with a lot of good ideas today, and they're the ones that, you know, I know the big bad developers, nobody likes them, but they're the ones who build housing. You know, just about every one of us who have a house or live in a house was built by a developer. And so work with them to see, you know, we need, even though we have all of these units and we have this exemption now, and we don't have to deal with VMT in certain projects, but we're not getting enough coming forward. We're not having enough coming forward or penciling them out. I didn't follow all the logic. Is it Sean that presented all that? Sorry, you lost me about halfway through there. But, you know, you speak their language. How can we could get more projects going forward? And I think we really have to do that. And I said, you know, inclusionary housing, we had, when I was mayor of San Marcos, we had inclusionary housing. It worked. Most people chose to pay the fee. But we also, like I mentioned earlier, we got to have the whole spectrum of housing so that this next generation doesn't feel left out and they can achieve the American dream as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, seeing no further comments, do any of my colleagues have any last comments they'd like to make? Okay. You sure? Okay, great. I just want to thank, obviously our team and the county team, thank you all so much for the work preparing, but really wanted to thank all the workshop participants and everyone who came and gave a presentation. Really thoughtful, constructive ideas, and I'm very much looking forward to staff kind of y'all having follow-up conversations and reporting back, you know, which of these ideas that folks brought forward can we implement, you know, relatively quickly. I think there was a lot of great ideas in there. So that being said, we are adjourned.
We have your
we
board.
have more,
yes, we do.
More comments.
Yes, and your board does actually have recommendations for this item.
Oh, we need to take a vote.
Yes, if you're interested in improving it.
Okay. Yes, we need apologies. I got so interested in the content. So this item, we have a motion to approve. Okay. Motion to approve staff recommendations from Supervisor, and a second from Supervisor Montgomery Stepp. Thank you very much. Go ahead and take a vote.
And Chair Lawson Rimmer, that motion passes unanimously with all supervisors being present and voting aye.
Okay, thank you. And do we now have non-agenda public comment?
And we do
Thanks.
have still non-agenda public comment. We have 3 individuals that are signed up to speak, and those are coming via phone. So for those that have requested to speak by phone, if you could please dial into the conference line now using the instructions that were provided to you. We'll give you a moment to do so. And then when you do dial in and it's your turn to speak, you'll be unmuted. You will hear a recording that will tell you to begin your comments. And we do have one person in the queue, so I'll go ahead and begin with them.
Hi, thank you. This is Peggy Walker. I'm a public health educator and youth mentor. I find one of the most egregious threats today to young people is the pot industry message that marijuana is, quote, medicine. The FDA clearly states pot has no currently accepted medical use and high potential for addiction. It's therefore disheartening to hear yesterday of members of this board supporting and promoting marijuana as valid medicine based on anecdotal suggestion. This fails to acknowledge FDA and other expert conclusions that pot has no scientifically proven medical benefits that outweigh potential risks. There's no standardization or regulation of dosing or labeling of pot products sold as medical. No warnings related to drug interactions, nor warnings that people have significantly different reactions to marijuana based on age, genetics, sex, method of consumption, and potency. Usage is a matter of buyer beware. One of the country's most respected health institutions, Cleveland Clinic, states there is not enough information available to know if marijuana's possible benefits outweigh its risks when used for health conditions. Answering the question, is it safe, Cleveland Clinic states, researchers don't know. Scientists and healthcare providers can't state any general benefits of, quote, miracle marijuana with certainty because there's not enough research about medical benefits or long-term effects. So I ask you, please consider the science and importance of pharmaceutical protocols before promoting marijuana for, quote, medical treatment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chair Lawson-Remer, not seeing any other callers called in. That will conclude public comment for non-agenda communication this morning.
Okay, thank you very much. Our meeting is now adjourned. And when are you coming back?
So the board will now recess into closed session to consider those matters listed under item 26 on yesterday's general legislative session agenda, as well as item 1 on the sanitation district agenda. If there are any reportable actions, they will be reported out after the conclusion of closed session today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.